Welcome to Theology Thursday. This week we're doing chapters 2 and 3. Last week we did the introduction, chapter 1. So if you didn't watch that video, you need to go back and watch it. And then next week we'll be covering chapters 4 and 5. Thank you for joining us. This is Adam Godbold and I'm Lindsay. I'm sure know us. So we're talking about the book You're Not Your Own by Alan Noble. We're doing this is a long video. So if you're on this video, you need to be in it to win it. Grab you a cup of coffee, grab you a cup of tea, something, because it's going to be long. So this week we're doing it a little bit differently. Instead of like fully preparing and him having what he wanted to say, I made the full outline. And so we're just going to kind of discuss through it. And this is kind of our first discussion through it because Adam wanted to give you the fresh stuff.
I prefer that.
The unthought out.
Yeah, the unthought out. Let's just think through it as we're walking through it.
All right, so I feel like at first you need a couple of things said with these two chapters specifically. In these two chapters, Noble is telling us how things are, not necessarily what should be.
Yeah, he's descriptive, not prescriptive.
Yes, we're describing the situation we find ourselves, not the situation we should find ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Also, I feel like you should make a note to not miss his sarcasm.
Yes.
He's very sarcastic, and in a lot of the places, you feel like he's telling you, like, painting like this beautiful idyllic picture or something, but he's being sarcastic.
Especially when he's talking about like efficiency and technique and whatnot. You're like, oh, that's a captivating way of thinking about it, and you realize, yeah, but this is very inhuman.
Right. He's being very sarcastic.
Yeah.
If there was a sarcastic font, he'd be typing in it a lot of time, right? So,
I'm just picturing the book, like his script suddenly turning into wingdings or something. Like I can't even understand what this is saying.
I feel like as a society, we should like come up with like a way that we write in vocal idioms. Like there should be a font for sarcasm. Like if I switch to Comic Sans in the middle of a paragraph, that should be like, I'm sarcastic.
it'd be, is it papyrus or papyri?
No, that's like for being like lofty and elevated, but like irrationally so.
Yeah.
I don't know what the sarcasm font would be.
Yeah. There should be one there.
Frenchy Sage. That's the sarcasm font, right? But we should all get together.
Oh, it's that font. He's being sarcastic.
We should get together and come up with a sarcastic font. That's like not italics, but like it's a different font, and we all recognize like, oh no, when you go from sans serif to serif, that means you're switching to sarcastic voice.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
I feel like that would be helpful in our written word society.
So those are the two
like
preparatory
things, right?
Okay, yeah.
Right. So now we're moving to chapter 2.
Okay. Which was titled
How Society Helps You Be Your Own.
Oh yeah.
Which is kind of the idea that society is encouraging this idea that you are your own.
Yeah. And
that you're responsible to and for your own self.
And there's the recurring refrain society provides.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the Good Dinosaur.
Yeah.
The storm provides.
That's what I was thinking.
Yes.
I kept thinking that, but I couldn't remember what popular film or whatever that was from. That's funny.
It's the pterodactyl.
Yeah. The storm provides.
On the Good Dinosaur.
Yes.
All right. So on page 37.
Yep.
He says, but it is difficult to promote human flourishing when flourishing looks different for literally every single person. So I feel like that's a good point because, like, how do you define health? Everybody has different priorities of what makes a good life a good life.
Yeah.
Like, how do you define good life? We would all have a different idea. Like, for me, what I would think would be the good life, which I feel like is completely unattainable, but most people be like, oh my gosh, that's so boring and stupid.
Yeah.
But some people's idea of like,
what is the dream? Well, like, what does it mean for the dream to be realized?
Right. And for some people I feel bad making fun of it now. That neighborhood they're building behind the paint store.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that would be the worst for me. I cannot think of a worse place in the world to be.
Yeah.
That is somebody's dream.
It is.
That neighborhood where all the houses look exactly alike and they're exactly 6 feet apart and the front yards are all exactly the same. Like, all that sameness is somebody's dream,
Yeah.
even if it's my nightmare. So how do you, in a society, like, how do you say, oh, here's the good life? Because clearly ours are going to be very different.
At Devereaux, we play a game each month called Four Corners, and each corner is numbered. And thank you, Jan, for putting that together for us. But one of the prompts is, would you rather live on a quiet farm, live on the beach, live in the big city, live in the mountains? And it's funny to see how everybody scatters, and you'll have one or two people alone over there and one or two over here alone over there, and then a bunch of people over here. And it's always just funny because it's like the people opposite from one another probably thinks that is nightmarish. I would never want to do that. There's probably some commonality. The mountain people probably are like, the quiet farm makes sense. Maybe the beach makes sense, but definitely not the big city.
Yeah. Beach.
What does it mean?
Sand in your floors all the time.
Huh?
How do they even get the sand out of their house? I don't understand. Anyway, so in counseling, there are dozens of different theories that define what health and illness would look like according to their point of view. So like cognitive behavioral therapy has like their view of the person. Like Adlerian therapy has a view of the person. Freud has a view of the person.
Yeah.
So you have these different therapies and these different theories that all have a different view on the person. And so the problem is,
like, what makes up a person or the idealized person?
Like, how do people think?
Okay.
Like, where's your conscious? Where's your subconscious? Where's the problem gonna lie? What do people need? What does health look like? Why does dysfunction happen? And the problem is that you can read all these different theories and you can probably find something that you would agree with in almost every single theory.
Yeah.
So even within yourself, you can't even define what health, illness, the good life would be. Yeah. Like, I can take all of those things and carry them around with me and have all these contradicting ideas and think, but yeah, that's right. That sounds right. Yeah. And none of it even agree, like, not even agreeing, like, person to person, but agreeing, like, within myself, I can't even agree. Yeah. Yeah. So that reminds me of, like, are my problems because I have wrong ideas? Are my problems because of my childhood? Are my problems because, like, I'm not viewing the world correctly? Like, yes. Yeah. All of them? Yeah. What were you going to say? Oh, it somewhat reminds me of the different therapy systems of therapy or approaches to therapy. It reminds me a little bit of like different approaches to ethics, because you've got different categories of ethics. You've got absolutism, you got non-absolutism, but even within those you've got subcategories. So you've got like antinomianism, which you're teaching a class on ethics right now, correct? And on the surface you think antinomianism, there's no way I'm going to have anything in common with this. And as you start like reading through it, it's like, oh, well, that's a valid point. Like, well, that's maybe a valid point, maybe in some circumstances. But then, so are you a situationalist? Like, no. But then you read situationalism, and there's an awful lot of truth there. The one law is the law of love. And so what is the most loving ethical response in this scenario, given all the givens of the scenario? Yeah. And so, I could see how there's a little bit of truth in all of them, and are any of them kind of a totalizing approach, in any and all circumstances of therapy or the need of therapy and whatnot. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, no, there's not an overarching. It's literally. This is the right way. It's literally your personal opinion and which founder you choose to follow. Right, so then you talked about justification. Okay. That in all of this, like figuring out your own good life and deciding what the good life is for you and how you're going to get there, all that. Existential justification. Yes, you have this burden to justify your own life, and that's too much to bear. So what does he mean when he says justification? Because justification is a theological term. It is. But I don't think he's talking about theological justification. I think he's talking about more of a personal justification. But maybe it's the same. Well, so I think what he's talking about. So theologically, justification is about forgiveness. And it's about pardon. But I think he's using it being made right. Yeah, being made right. I think what he's
talking about when he's talking about existential justification is our desire to feel ourselves validated, and it reminds me of like the closing scene of Saving Private Ryan. The movie begins and ends with the same season. Well, so this aged veteran, he's out in a memorial a cemetery, right? And
all the white crosses.
Yep, all the white crosses, a few stars of David, and or Star of Davids, I guess. But so
Stars of David.
Yeah, but the Star of David is like the term as a whole.
Yes, but it'd be like cul-de-sacs. It's cul-de-sac.
Oh, sure.
Not cul-de-sacs.
Or mothers-in-law. But so he
I think it's Stars of David.
So he asks his wife. I think how it goes is he asks his wife, tell me I'm a good man or something, and she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, just tell me I'm a good man, that I've lived my life well, and that sort of thing. Because at the end of the day, I think everyone wants to. I say everyone. That's again a totalizing term, and not everyone cares whether or not their life meant something.
I mean, everyone cares that their lives mean something in the way that they intend it to mean something. Sure.
But so yeah. At the end of the day, what you are left wrestling with is, am I worth it? Am I worth like the relationships that I have? Am I worth like have the decisions that I've made in life? Or it's not so much like on the scale of good or bad. It's not that. It's in the end, have I done something meaningful with my life, and have I done the best that I could, and that sort of thing, which is in a sense it is, you know, there has to be grace and mercy and a little bit of pardon and forgiveness involved in that. But I don't think he's talking about, oh, can we find ourselves forgiven? It's at the end of the day, do we feel that our lives are validated, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I often think about like funerals and things, and like no one would come to my funeral.
Yeah, they would.
No. Like, and that would be so depressing. Like, even though I'd be dead, I'd be like totally mad at all of you. Because I'm like, okay, one time you threw me a surprise birthday party, and it was the worst thing in the world.
The people who were there may not want to hear that.
Because no one showed up.
Well, yeah.
One person. It was at someone else's house, and other than the people that lived in that house, one person showed up, and they didn't even know that they were there for my birthday party.
But they were there.
It was so depressing. It was supremely depressing, and I always think my funeral is going to be exactly like that.
Oh, I didn't realize this was a funeral. Who
exactly.
Is it? Oh, Lindsay? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be like, talking about in justification, I will have none. Like, it will have not been worth it at all. Right.
So I think that's what he's getting at with, so he says, since we each are responsible for our own existential justification, it is not enough for society to offer one or two or even 100 visions of the good life. And he goes on talking about the different ways, different options that we need. We need options. Yeah, I think he's talking about like life, the total life's validation.
Okay. So he also talks about this page, 38. Okay. No matter how remarkable you are, that historically and statistically you're unremarkable.
Yeah.
So how does that affect your attempt at self-justification?
I mean, he makes it a point to say, in contradiction to what we said last week, he calls out existentialism, and he talks about, I don't think our country has been all that directly affected by existentialism.
It totally is.
But it is. But he acknowledges that as well. So I think in some sense
most of our understanding of postmodernism, I think everybody tried to hold naturalism and postmodernism in the same, like together at the same time, and that's existentialism.
Yeah.
And so we might not say, like, we might have said like, oh, we're postmodern, like we went into a postmodern time, but so many people were still holding on to the naturalism and the modernism that it was just existentialism.
Well, so that we talked a little bit briefly about meta-modernism,
Yeah.
meta-modernity last week. Yeah, so that's what I understand it to be. It accepts all the givens of postmodernism, but it really longs for the assurances of modernism. It wants something to really mean something, and it wants something to really matter. It wants true love to be real and substantial and attainable, and at the end of the day for it to have mattered and not just lasted for a life, but to eternally in some sense matter. So it's kind of an existential longing, living in a nihilistic world almost.
Well, I mean,
which is what
naturalism ends in nihilism, and existentialism is the escape from nihilism.
Yeah.
So, okay.
It's the pressure release valve of nihilism.
So this smallness, do you think it gives us like an excuse? Like, the things that I do don't matter because I'm so insignificant and small that it doesn't matter if in this one instance I made the wrong choice or I hurt somebody because I'm so infinitely small, they're so infinitely small, this situation is even infinitely smaller. Does it give us like an out?
I mean, in some ways.
Or I'll give you the other side.
Okay, what's the
Or
other
does it
side?
crush our sense of self? Because all that I know
Mm-hmm.
is my personal experience.
Yeah.
All right. My experience of the world is from me as the center. Even though I acknowledge as I get older that I'm not the center,
Mm-hmm.
my whole experience is me as the center. As a baby, you think that everything in the world exists for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're born and things exist only when you can see them.
Yeah.
Things exist only for the need that you have for them. Like your mom only exists because you need
You
her
have
to.
needs.
You have need. She needs to hold you. That's why she's here.
Yeah.
That's her point. And so as you grow, you realize mom is an actual person who, doesn't just exist to hold me.
Yeah.
But still, my experience is still only self-centered.
It's first person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always, the main character
Mm-hmm.
in my own life because that's how you view the
Mm-hmm.
world. So you have this, on one hand, grand sense of self
Mm-hmm.
because I'm always the center of my experience, and then this small sense of self because, well, in the grand scheme of things, I'm like
one of
nothing.
8 billion currently
Right now.
living.
Yeah.
8
billion now, not to mention all
Yeah.
those who've come before, all those who'll come after. Like, I'm a speck.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, how do you balance those two things with justification? Like, justifying my existence. On the one hand, my existence doesn't matter at all. On the other hand, it is the supreme only thing that matters.
Yeah.
No. I wonder if they can get it on the video.
Set down that blanket. You're not able to use it.
The boys' bedroom is under this room, and we call it Narnia because you can hear through the vents, and so it kind of sounds like
it's voices
coming from another world. All right. Well, so several years ago, we had a family devotion. I don't know how many years ago it was because time has just
It becomes a blur.
It slipped by me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Imogene is supposed to still be like a first grader, and she's graduated. So I don't understand. But so we had a family devotion. We were all talking about when you go outside and look up at the night sky and how that makes you feel some sort of way. And so some of the family said, I go out, I look up at the night sky, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This is fantastic. I'm part of something huge and big and wonderful. And then the other half of us were like, I go out and look up at the night sky and think, wow, I am nothing. I'm small. I mean, I don't matter at all.
Yeah.
Like, I am a speck on the flower that Horton's carrying around and nobody even knows I'm here.
Yeah.
And so we're both seeing the same thing. We're both having very big feelings about what we're seeing, and essentially feeling the situation is the exact same. We're both feeling this sense of vastness.
Yeah.
But
and does it make you sense wonder, or does it
half
make
of
you
the
feel
people
small?
felt, half of our family felt the vastness like made you important, and half our family felt like the vastness made you unimportant. Like, it's the exact same thing, just opposites.
Yeah.
Like, you end up on opposite ends of the spectrum. And I imagine if we had that discussion today, we would maybe even have different answers than we had then.
Yeah.
Like each individual would have different answers to
and
that
some
question.
of that could have to do with like season of life and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
And so that did remind me of Psalm 8:3-4, where he says, "When I look at the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you've set in place, what is man that you're mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him?"
Yeah.
It's that bigness and smallness all wrapped up together, you know?
Yeah.
So I was actually, this is kind of tangentially related, but I was reading an article about divorce and about how divorce affects, like, the ripples of effect of divorce, that it affects people generationally.
Yeah.
But it also affects friend groups. That, you know, we can see the generations, like if grandparents get divorced, clearly then the parents are raised in an atmosphere that's different, and they have all the risks involved of that. And so then the grandkids are then raised by those parents. And so we can see those ripples. But in friend groups, if one couple in a friend group gets divorced, everyone else is more likely to get divorced.
Yeah.
And once the second one gets divorced, everybody else's risk goes up.
It's like a contagion.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, for the one couple that's getting divorced, you think, oh, this is fine. We'll get through it. You know, we'll get to a new normal eventually. And you kind of don't think about how many other people and how many other things and relationships you're affecting around you.
Yeah.
Like, it is small because it's just one couple. You know, it's one family and, like, how many?
Yeah.
But it's huge because then that one affects the next and affects generationally down the line.
And for those that are in it, it
is their whole world.
Earth-shakingly huge. Yeah.
Like that's all of them right there.
It's all they had.
So it's kind of both that big and small at the same time.
Yeah.
So on page 39, he talks about trying to make sense of our purpose in life, and that we look to models to be who appear to be fulfilled, and we try to achieve that kind of flourishing or meaningfulness. And so I was just thinking about like the places that we maybe find most of our models today. So I did give a sermon on Mother's Day about models specifically.
Yeah, model mothers.
Yeah.
Right?
And so I feel like models are biblical. Like the whole Bible is full of stories of people who give us models, either what to do, what not to do, or what to do when we do what we shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Like, and so I feel like models, it's not a bad thing to follow a model. But where do we get our current models?
Yeah.
And so some of those, the influencer culture, of course, which I guess this ties into social media. But social media, sometimes we can find models that are maybe more personal, you know?
Okay.
Like it may be someone you actually know.
Sure. Yeah. Like granddad or the pastor or you know,
or just somebody you know in real life, like an actual person. But on social media, you kind of have that fact and fiction kind of going on at the same time. But influencers, even if it's an influencer of one. Several years ago, I came across someone who was trying to become an influencer, and they had like they created like a website, and they had like their website. And it had been up for a while, and they had one follower, and so I was like, well, I wonder who's following them, and I clicked on it, and it was them. They were following themselves. They were their own influencer. Oh, my computer's listening to me. Stop it, Siri. So also, like, I was kind of celebrities. Yeah. Our celebrities are weird now.
Well, we create celebrity of folks that traditionally were not celebrities, because traditionally celebrities have been sports stars, musical artists.
I was trying to see if there was a button to make her
I don't know. I
think
if you click on her or something, maybe she'll stop.
Siri is trying to
maybe escape.
Listening.
Yeah, boom, escape. Okay. That's it.
She's listening to me.
Yeah.
It was driving me crazy. She's like.
So it used to be actors or professional athletes, athletes, and
maybe musicians,
artists, actors, athletes, and artists. Yeah. So,
you're such a pastor.
I rarely use alliteration. Rarely ever, but when I do, it's pretty epic. So we've turned celebrities, we've turned politicians into celebrities. Yeah. We've turned like news anchors and
weathermen,
pundits, weathermen. Got updates today about a celebrity weatherman. We turn psychologists and psychiatrists and authors and whatnot into celebrities in you know.
So I feel like celebrities is like almost too broad of a category now, because it could mean like anybody.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Anybody can be a celebrity. Like
yeah, celebrity pastors even.
Yeah, like you might meet someone and they're like, you know, oh, I'm kind of famous on the internet. You know,
I'm kind of a big deal.
I'm a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. One time in my whole life, got recognized
in public. I remember that. I was there
from my website.
Yeah.
One time.
And I was the one that was asked when you walked away. I'm like, is that Friendly Chaz?
No, that was a different one.
Oh, that was okay.
That was the internet forum recognition.
Yeah,
that was not a website. My website recognition was at
this
McDonald's.
Was like I was gonna say we were out in public somewhere and somebody
back when we used to actually go to McDonald's, which we don't anymore. All right, so and there, I feel and celebrity pastors and celebrity Christians, and I feel like that's where we need to talk about like limitations that we put on our models.
That we do or ought?
That we ought. Okay. That we probably don't, but we probably should, because you know, like you have like you'll have like a big celebrity pastor or you know a celebrity Christian who has some
of them brand new believers.
Or has some kind of moral failing.
Yeah.
And then your own sense of who you are in Christ is somehow like diminished because of this person.
Yeah.
Because you're just putting too much on a person.
Yeah.
You know, like when in the Bible it's easier because like you're reading the story of David and you can go, well, he clearly messed up there because it literally says, hey, he messed up there. And so you see like, oh, what did David do when he messed up?
Yeah. Oh, he wrote Psalm 51.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have a model of how to pick yourself back up, but like the actual falling parts are not the model. But so many people like deconstruct when their pastor or their, you know, celebrity Christian of choice kind of loses it, they lose it.
Yeah.
Because they're just putting too much on the model.
Yeah.
And if the model can't make it, they can't make it.
Yeah.
But there's so much more pressure on the model.
Well, and that's part of kind of the underlying theme of the whole book is we put all the pressures onto something that's not built to bear the weight of the pressures.
Yeah.
You know, like belonging to ourselves. What if you don't because you can't and you weren't designed to and whatnot, and inevitably that is going to fall to pieces.
Yeah. Or in the celebrity Christian instances, you're talking about new believers who suddenly have all this pressure to have like everything in their life
to influence millions of people
everything
for Christ.
Perfectly sanctified immediately. They don't get time to grow. They don't get time to like go through some of their own baggage and learn and be discipled. Like they basically like are saved into suddenly being a Paul or a Peter. Like they're just expected to like be the big one, you know?
Yeah.
We don't give them time or grace to kind of work through where they've been and where God's leading them. We don't like, number one, like we're not the Spirit, and we try to like say like, well, if they're really saved, then they would do all X, Y, and Z. And it's like the Spirit's working, and I'm gonna let Him work because He knows this better than I do.
If you were a British podcaster, you'd have said X, Y, and Z.
Well, I'm not British.
That's what
I'm
they do.
very Southern. Although Southerners sometimes sound like British folks.
Yes. No, British folks sometimes sound like Southerners.
I think we came second.
We did, but it's about priority. Okay, so that reminds me, you know, when we're born again, we normally fancy ourselves, to use a Britishism. We fancy ourselves like complete and whole, and in a sense we are. We're sanctified initially, but we think every bit of who I am belongs to Christ, and every bit of like all of my habits and all that, I lay it on the altar and whatnot. And we think we sincerely have, and in some sense we sincerely have, to lose myself in the grammar there. But imagine if the cameras were rolling 2 or 3 hours a day of our lives, because you know we're a podcaster or whatever, and everyone's watching, and we've got to you know, in some sense, like this is our story, and like our livelihood is built around our story, and this is where we happen to be. just imagine all the foibles and the screw ups and whatnot that, when you're just a humble kid in church, or a teenager in church or whatever, you've got all these people that have blue hair and look on your life and love you, and they're like, he thinks, he'll get there, bear with him.
Those first year
wow, his language
students.
still isn't cleaned up. That sort of thing. And
that know everything and nothing all at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think it has to do with like our conscious awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we might have given over everything that we're conscious of and that we're consciously aware of. But there are still things under the surface that we're not consciously aware of, that as the Spirit works on removing some of those top level things, the bottom level things can then rise up and we can deal with them. And it just takes time for that iceberg to melt.
And there are corners of your heart that you didn't even know were there.
Right.
You're like, oh, wait, what? Yeah. Okay.
In our models, though, we're also always looking for the next best thing.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about like looking for I want to belong to my spouse unless something better comes along. We want the option of out. And that reminded me of Pip going for a walk with Pippin that time.
Oh gosh.
And he asked me if he could eat a dandelion, and I was like, yeah, sure. Like, they're edible technically. And so he picks up a dandelion and he bites the flower off and he chews on it for a second, and he spits it out and chokes, and he's like, oh, it's terrible. And then a couple seconds later, we're a couple feet down the road, and he sees another one he picks up. He says, maybe I like this one.
Yeah.
And he bites that, and it went on for
it's like half the neighborhood.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
He probably ate 20 dandelions trying to find a dandelion that he liked. He is sincerely convinced that next dandelion was going to be the one.
Yeah.
He doesn't like dandelion. They're not good tasting flowers. Like, anyway, Imogen loves dandelions, so maybe I shouldn't say that. But
yeah.
So we always think that there's like that something.
Yeah.
Like a new car he talks about the new
car. The Mazda commercial.
It's going to make your life magically better. Or maybe that vacation, or a promotion, a bigger house, new blue jeans.
Yeah.
I'm bad about buying blue jeans. I try so hard not to. So we find that our lives are still the same even after the changes are made. Yeah. Like, we have more money, we spend more money. Like, we have the new jeans, but we still need to lose 20 pounds. We got that vacation, but we still have to clean out the garage when we get home. Like, our problems are just following us because we're the problem.
Yeah.
The problem's you.
Yeah.
And so even with the new car, it's just you and your problems in a new car.
Yeah.
And then you got new car problems.
New car problems, new car payments. Yeah.
And so we're always looking for the next best thing. Yeah. But, So then he starts talking about choice paralysis, and he talks in a couple places about choice paralysis, I felt like. And so, like, I have definitely been there where there have been so many choices. I'm just like, forget it. I'm not buying it at all. Yeah. Just not going to do it. Man, swimsuit shopping has been
And that's just
terrible.
on making a purchase.
That's just buying something.
Not like career path, college, choice.
Nothing serious. Yeah. That's like buying a car seat takes months of research because there's so many options, and you just shut down and turn it off. And you're like, forget it.
Some people just go to Walmart and buy a car seat.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You can't just go to Walmart.
They think you're crazy.
Gotta research these things. So we have psychology. We have heuristics. These are those mental shortcuts that simplify your problems and prevent choice overload. There are a lot of different kinds of heuristics, but basically they exist. Your brain makes these shortcuts or habits, or helps you like narrow down your choices, so you're not actively having to make every single choice you make every day. In a given day, you make 35,000 choices. That's what they estimate.
It's overwhelming.
That means that about every hour you're awake, you make 2,000 decisions every hour. So if you didn't have heuristics, you didn't have these little shortcuts, you would never even make it out of your room in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, you would not. I actually had a patient at the mental hospital one time who found himself in that situation where he could not get past breakfast.
Because he didn't know what next?
Because he didn't know what next. Because a trauma in his life had, like, shortcutted all his heuristics. They all went out the window. And he just could not make... By the time he got to breakfast, the day was half over. And he just couldn't make any more decisions. And he would just freeze and stand there for hours. Because he just couldn't do anymore.
Wow.
the heuristics are keeping all of us sane and keeping us going and making it so that we can do those things.
So those are like the habits that become second nature to us.
Sort of.
You
and
get up, you make your way to the bathroom.
Habits, different ways of deciding things. Like you go to buy a new car, sometimes you just say, I want what's available. That's an availability heuristic. Okay. Whatever is available. Yeah. Sometimes it's based on an anchor. Like, I don't want to spend more than X amount on this. Anything that comes in under it, sure, that's what I want. Okay. Sometimes it's based on you think that it's scarce. Me and Vanilla that one time.
Who? Oh, gosh. Yeah.
You know, it was a heuristic issue.
I read that there's going to be a great vanilla shortage within the next 2 years. We should stock up.
Anyway. So, the heuristics sometimes lead us to bad decisions. Yeah. Because they're easy. Yeah. Their job is to make your cognitive load easy. It's not to make your cognitive decisions well. Yeah. It's just to make it easy. So, we get into these bad habits or these ruts that we just can't get out of. Okay. And then we have to actively work to make it better. So, and then there are also scenarios where the heuristics just fall short. Like when you're talking about those big, weighty decisions. Yeah. Sometimes like a change is happening whether you like it or not, and you've got to make a choice to go one way or the other. And if you don't make a choice, that's a choice in and of itself. Yeah. And so like the big, like, what am I going to do with my life? Where do I want to be in 5 years? Like those things heuristics are going to fail you because there's not a lot that they're going to have to fill in. You're going to have to actually think through those things and make real choices. The heuristics just shortcut your choices so that you're not overcome and overwhelmed by choice paralysis like he was talking about. Yeah. So he talks about the living storied lives. Mm-hmm. And we talked a little bit about this earlier. About if you have a memory from childhood, your memory of that experience is not the experience. Yeah, it's the memory is different than the experience. Not just like factually, but it's even perceived differently. It's perceptually different. And your memory of a childhood experience is now an adult thinking back on childhood, not a child experiencing something in childhood. Yeah. Like the one memory that Adam always brings up is his mom carrying him in from the car. Like being asleep. Yeah, he was asleep. Coming home from the grandparents, 30-minute drive. Oh my gosh, he only had to drive 30 minutes to see his grandparents. I had to drive like 2 hours or 13 hours. But at night you'd fall asleep and it was nice because you'd pull in the driveway and I would like kind of wake up when I felt like the car hitting the curb, you know, going over the curb and you'd, whoa. And then you think, well, I would think I want to fall back asleep because I don't want to walk in. And I would in some ways pretend sleep. Fake sleep. Fake sleep so that I could just get carried in because then it's, you know, it's and then your mom would carry you nice, in and take off your socks. And it creates memories. Yeah. Right. But now as an adult, like we were talking about, like everybody wake up, we're home. Yes. And like you've done it so many times. You're like imposing on your mom, like, oh my gosh, she was so tired. Yeah. And she still carried my fat butt inside. After I'd eaten way too many sweets at my grandma's house and took off my nasty, sweaty socks and my feet probably smelled terrible. Like you're imposing all these things because you've done it from the other side. Mm. And so the memory isn't the memory. You changed your own story. You rewrote that memory. Yeah, no, I don't even remember that like from my own perspective at the time, like visual perspective. I don't like envision me trying to keep my eyes closed but squinting and seeing my mom coming. I'm like viewing it from outside the car, watching over my mom's shoulder as she picks me up and lugs me in, and it's really weird. Huh. Did your dad have to pick up Carrie? Is that how the situation went? Your dad
probably not. I don't think so, but I don't know. I don't know, because I was just trying to get a free
You're
kid.
Faking asleep.
Yeah. I wasn't gonna peek.
So sometimes we alter our stories to fit our current identity. Like if you're feeling brave, you might remember a situation and you might impose on that you were braver than you really were. Yeah. Or you might impose like you're intellectual now, and so you might impose a certain intellectualism on yourself as a child. Yeah. Like, oh, as a 4-year-old, I was very much into Shakespeare. You were not into Shakespeare. Although we did have one that Imogene was like 8 and her favorite book was Oliver Twist. That was weird.
She loved Oliver Twist.
She was obsessed with the idea of being an orphan.
Yes.
Says something about us, probably. But we shift how we view ourselves to fit our current view of ourselves. Like we re-story things. And then we all
is that what he's talking about, like self-authoring?
Re-authoring and self-authoring. There's like a whole therapy.
He talks about Jordan Peterson, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But Jordan Peterson's version of self-authoring, I don't think is technically a narrative therapy, which is more of the self-authoring, but it kind of borders along that line. So our culture can have an impact on how we write our stories, but also I feel like the gospel has a big impact on how we write our stories.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you're talking about like before you met Christ, that story before you met Christ is a lot different than after.
Yeah.
After you start seeing some grace that kind of went back and back. So when people are like, oh, when did you first start coming to Christ? You start looking back and you're like, I guess all along. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you can see those moments.
Yeah.
You know, where he was drawing you in or protecting you or whatever it might be. We kind of have a little bit different stories because we grew up in the church.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, my parents got
Never
saved.
were like wayward.
Well, my parents got saved when I was like 6, 7.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a little bit of a different story than, oh, I didn't come to Christ until I was
but you were
29.
dealing drugs when you were 5, so there was a...
I was not. I was selling my art on the street.
Selling your art on the street to your future dad.
Yes. I was selling my art. I know where Pippin gets it.
Yes.
He gets his hustler from me.
Yes.
So, a few years ago, we had in our homeschool, we focused on fables. And, you know, fables always have the moral of the story, you know, like you have like the pot and the kettle and you have the moral. And so what I did, which ended up being very fascinating, and when we cover it again next year, I'll definitely do that again. But I didn't tell them what the moral of the story was. Yeah. We discussed it and came up with our own morals.
Did y'all like compare at the end? Like, well, here's what Aesop said the moral was.
Sometimes.
Okay.
And sometimes it would come up like halfway through. They'd be like, well, what did he say that was supposed to be? Yeah. You know. So like the tortoise and the hare. Our kids still kids still debate the moral of the tortoise and the hare. But it was like an hour.
Everyone knows the moral to that one, and I don't know anybody that like argues that that's the valid moral.
Yeah. Well,
because
so
the moral
tortoise
doesn't
and hare, the moral is slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
Okay. The kids felt like if you're gonna race, you need to take it seriously. Yeah. That was the moral that they got.
The problem was the hare was resting on his laurels and got lazy,
did not take it seriously.
Cocky.
And if you're gonna race, you need to take it seriously.
Pride comes before the fall.
They felt like it was that. I felt like the moral was kind of talent isn't all that's required to complete a task.
Sometimes it's just diligence.
Yeah. And, sometimes the untalented person does it because they're the one that just did it. Yeah. And sometimes the talented person just doesn't do it because they just won't do it. Yeah. But it's kind of like the reauthoring and like finding morals based on who we are and where we are. Because some of our kids would find morals based on like the characters. Like they liked foxes, and so they didn't like that the foxes were always sneaky. So and there's the moral.
They thought the fox is clever.
The fox was never sneaky.
He's clever. Yeah. Yeah.
These are also ones that would be Slytherins if they were in Hogwarts.
Yes.
So we reauthor our own, but how does society provide identities for us? We talked about those 2 parts of responsibility of identity being knowing and expressing. Yeah. That I give shape to my life by expressing it. And that reminded me of like the early 2000s. We were married. We weren't kids then. In the early 2000s.
Okay. Yeah.
We got married. Yeah. And like there was like the emo scene. And like you couldn't appreciate the music without being...
Oh, you had to be a scene kid.
A scene kid. Yeah. It was always weird for me because I would go to the shows, but I did not look the right part.
You did not have the melodramatic, like,
I was not an emo kid at heart. I was a pop punk kid at heart. Yeah. And so I didn't fit, even though I liked the music, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Some of it annoyed me.
The music.
But, and to borrow from the 90s, if you didn't look the part, you were a poser.
Yeah.
You weren't real, you know? Like, you couldn't just like the music and identify with the music of being a whiny, emotional person that hates life and is melodramatic about everything. Adam likes sad movies. He's very much an emo kid at heart. I do not like sad movies. But he pointed out like that none of that was entirely new. Okay. That like need to like embody the things that we identify with or like, especially with music. I feel like music is specifically embodying. You know, like country music fans dress a certain way. Yeah. You know, rap music fans dress a certain way. Yeah. Like you have to like fit the mold. Like it would be weird to see like a Betty White type rolling down the street listening to Snoop Dogg. You'd be like, what is happening right now? Yeah. You know? Yeah. It would trip you up. Yeah. But can you not just like something and not have to be the something?
What's her name? Friends with Snoop Dogg?
Martha Stewart.
Yeah. I wonder if Martha Stewart listens to Snoop Dogg. That'd be kind of weird.
I assume she does.
She surely has like done a deep dive.
I mean, I feel like she has to. Yeah. If my friend was a music artist, I'd have to listen to them. Yeah. You can't just not. Anyway, so we also have the social media expression. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's just my personality, but I always feel like there's only two ways to be on social media. There's the 100% all-in oversharing every detail of your life, or there's the I'm not sharing anything.
I was asked today.
It's like I share when I pee on a stick and have a positive pregnancy test.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. It's that, or I share after the baby's born. Yeah. Like, I feel like there's no normal in between anymore. You can't just, share normally. A normal amount.
I was talking to a dear close friend today, and I was like, hey, I should probably tell you, we had a tree fall down a few days ago. And he said, what the heck? What? Like, I feel like I should have seen that on Facebook or something. I was like, we hadn't posted it. Yeah, I said, we're not trying to stir up drama or anything. But I said, eventually we'll probably post a picture or something like that.
Right? There's the extremes. Like, so I also saw, like, all of social media, like, you curate your own little bubble, right? Yeah. But I saw a video last week of somebody sharing that they even curate, like, it says like most relevant comments. They curate that to fit you. So you're the most, it's not the most relevant. It's
the ones that are going to get you baited most. Like,
but
what an idiot. I can't believe that guy said that.
It's typically the ones you would likely agree with or interact with.
Yeah, I would think it'd be the ones you'd interact with.
Like, so maybe if you just like comments that you agree with, it'll show you things you agree with. And if you're constantly like rage posting, it's going to show you things you hate all the time.
All caps.
I don't know. But the most relevant feature for comments is literally most relevant to me specifically.
Not in the course of the conversation.
Because she was talking about like her and her significant other. I don't remember if it was a boyfriend or what, but they both had watched the same video. Yeah. And like she had looked at the comments, and the comments were what she thought, and when he looked at the comments were the exact opposite. Because it was like curating.
But that created an awkward conversation.
It's weird.
Why is it showing you that for most relevant?
Yeah. Well,
it showed me this for most relevant.
Yeah, it's like when you start seeing ads on your Instagram, if they're like inappropriate, you should maybe look at your viewing stuff, because it's all based on algorithms for you. So, mine right now is showing me swimsuits, nothing but swimsuits, and I want it to stop. Yeah. Because I don't like swimsuits. So all this curation, we're never like challenged. Like it never helps you grow, because like in normal community, you're with people who maybe you don't agree with. Yeah. Or who maybe have a slightly different perspective that they can share. And so you kind of grow, you learn, you grow up a little, you learn to bear people. Yeah. Like with their idiosyncrasies, like you learn to bear that aunt that's just kind of annoying. Yeah.
Unless you deem it a toxic relationship, and then you just end it.
But I think that's like a modern culture thing. I think that's only because we have the option of digital community that you can forego
to have this real
the natural community. You don't have to bear the aunt anymore. You can just pretend they don't exist. You can give yourself a new aunt.
Yeah.
which is weird.
Your cat could be your aunt.
My cat would be a terrible aunt.
Well,
she would be worse than my aunts. My aunts are great, for the record. For the record, my aunts are wonderful. I love you all. I don't know about your aunts.
I've got good aunts.
Just checking.
I've got good aunts.
Just trying to get you in a little trouble. So, like, in social media, I feel like it curates us an identity.
Yeah.
And the only other that we see is whoever's the villain.
Yeah.
Because if we're the hero, you have to have a villain.
Yeah.
So that's the only other that you see is like the exact opposite.
The anti-hero.
Yeah, the anti-you.
Yeah. The arch nemesis.
Yeah. So, switching tracks just a little bit. I mean, it kind of goes into that. We desire to be looked directly into the eyes by some authority figure and told that we're accepted and loved.
Yeah.
That reminded me very much of Wesley bands.
Yeah.
The Wesleyan system of bands and what is it? Bands and classes
societies.
and societies.
Yeah.
But it's very much a band thing.
The concentric circles. Yeah.
So if you can expand on that a little bit.
So a band.
For anybody who doesn't know about Wesleyan.
Yeah, a band would have been a kind of a micro discipleship.
Would have been
community.
or is?
Would have been and is.
Okay.
Then I mean, there's a kind of movement for banded discipleship nowadays.
Yeah.
In the wider Wesleyan world. So Wesley's bands
also called now would be like accountability partner.
Yeah,
or
but
accountability group.
Yes, but
I know you're gonna think that it's the bands.
Accountability groups tend to just be kind of they beat around the bush too much.
Bands are very direct.
They are very direct, but you're kind of in covenant together. Like we're gonna meet X often. We're gonna go over X questions. Here are the places of like temptation and sin. Yeah, here are the places of temptation and sin in my own life, and each person may have like different areas, and you covenant together to meet together, to pray for one another, to check in on one another, to watch over one another's souls, as would kind of be the terminology used there, and you ask each other, like, hey, what sins have you committed? Banded, like the bands were so the classes were small groups of like 8 to 15 or something, and it'd be guys and girls and people from all walks of life gathered together, and the main question of conversation was, how is it with your soul? And so each person would give a general assessment of how they're doing with spiritual disciplines.
Classes are like small groups.
Yes, but they're not informational. They're not a study. They're not informational. They are fellowship and
accountability,
kind of group therapy. How is it with your soul? Like, man, I've just had a rough week. Really? What? And you'd ask follow-up questions, like, and at some point, you may feel like, hey, pushed them too hard. Let us know and we'll back off. That's more of an accountability type structure. Banded discipleship was, what sins have you committed this week?
And then having somebody look you in the eyes and say, Jesus forgives you, and so do I.
Yes. Someone look you in the eye.
Which
knowing you fully to the extent they can, and loving you completely, and
it's kind of a Jesus with skin on kind of thing.
Yes, but then also, hey, we're not confessing that sin next week. Like, we're gonna get victory. Here's how we're gonna help you get victory. That sort of thing. And so even the best intended like accountability groups typically aren't that intense, but at the same time, they're also not as effective.
And they're a little more generic.
Yeah, they're more generic, and they're far less effective, because part of being
in the Wesleyan system, you would be a part of all three. Correct?
Yes. No, Wesley idealized the bands, but he didn't have a big. That was not very popular.
Jealous because
you had to be a part of the class to get a ticket to the society.
Right.
Yes.
I'm a little jealous because you've always been involved in bands. And like different, the bands kind of shift and change, but I've never been able to be a part of one, which makes me a little jealous because women typically, number one, won't be honest with each other.
Keep everyone at arm's length.
And number two, won't prioritize things like that. Like, it is hard to get any.
You gotta get somebody to watch the kids.
Right. It's a little bit more of an act of arranging for a mom to get out typically, and it's something you just typically don't prioritize the same way.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like y'all can always get men to show up to men's breakfast. Ladies' lunch is
Well-
always much more poorly attended because women we don't prioritize that fellowship community thing.
Moms could get creative and
Even
do
though
that sort of
moms
thing.
cry online all the time about not having friends, not having community, not having this, like, and when you try to have it, no one shows up. They don't want to do it because it requires you to show up.
Yeah.
Maybe have
maybe
people
in the
show
context,
up to you, and people don't like having people in their house because they see things like the blinds over here.
Yeah. Maybe in the context of a play date, though, they could covenant together to, like, hey, I've got things in my life I need someone.
Our children?
No.
Okay.
What, our children? Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Can you imagine having a conversation like that?
Yeah.
With our children?
No, you'd have to be like, hey, kids, go play.
Yeah. They're a little intense. Yeah. So the beauty and efficiency, says, of social media is we can get this affirmation and we can quantify it.
Oh, yeah. I got 20 likes or...
Right. So, okay, but the opposite side of that is that we also get non-affirmation. We can quantify that. Like, they took away the dislike button.
Getting ratioed.
Right? Yes. So they took away the dislike button because they didn't want us anymore.
Yeah.
They want us to be nicer to each other. But now...
I think there should just be, like, the side-eyed button.
Oh, there should be a side-eye button.
Or the bug-eyed, like...
Yeah. Or the little teeth, like the...
Yeah.
The yikes.
Yeah. Or the eye roll, that would be nice, huh? Yeah, I think it's
but we don't need a like button anymore because now we assume that if someone didn't like it, they disliked it.
Yeah.
Even though most of the time it's just the algorithm buried it and they didn't even see it.
Yeah.
But we think, oh, I put this out there and I only got 3 likes. I have 503 friends. That means 500 people disliked me.
I only have 503 friends.
I don't know how many friends I have, actually.
Kidding.
I don't count.
I mean, I've got a lot more than them.
Yeah. But, like, we feel like dissed and unseen based on the lack of likes.
Yeah.
So when you get your affirmation from likes, you get your dissing from not getting them.
You curate, you project, you are seen, you are affirmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when the social media will change their algorithms, everybody goes crazy because, like, your insides are being ripped out because you feel like you're losing relationships and friends and affirmation because people just don't see you anymore.
Yeah.
So, anyway, society, he talks about society giving us meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I thought about when he was talking about this was that we live to create content now and not experience things.
Yeah.
Like, where were we? Or some dude was just, it was Walmart.
Yeah.
Some dude just videotaping his wife checking out at Walmart. It was the weirdest thing. And I was like, I mean, I guess she's some kind of influencer or something.
And he's like got the camera up over her, like.
Yeah. He's like really getting into it. And she was just checking out at Walmart.
Yeah. And they weren't young.
No.
They were not young.
So
she was in a motorized cart.
We're living to create content and not have experiences. And so I was thinking about the Northern Lights that popped up.
Yeah.
Like, how many people just went out and actually just looked up at the sky?
Yeah. Everybody's like, oh, I gotta take pictures and post. Even though all of my friends were posting the exact same. I mean, and I took pictures and I showed.
I did not.
I was glad I took pictures because I had friends that missed it and were like, I didn't realize it was happening tonight or last night. And I was like, yeah, here it is. And they were like, oh, that was cool. I'm sad I missed it.
Our neighbor was like harassing us because I didn't have my phone, and you can see it better if you have your iPhone. And I was like, I'm not having this mediated by a screen. I'll just look at everybody else's pictures later and see what you saw.
I took the hit for the whole family. I was looking at it through the screen.
So I experienced it. You documented it.
Yes.
I went inside before the police showed up.
Yes.
But
not a bad thing, but yeah. The police did show up.
So, how did your use of technology shape your memory of the event?
So
have you gone back a single time to look at those photos this week?
No, you like captured hundreds of photos since.
And so it's just buried somewhere in your camera.
Yeah, it's buried, but it'll pop up in my memories down the road. My phone will even
Do you remember what it actually looked like, or do you only remember what it looked like through your camera?
No, I remember what it looked like because you could hardly see it. You had to like really focus to see it, but it was like it was so you could see like the highlight that was like cutting through diagonally more with the naked eye than you could see all the color variations. Yeah. But you could see
I felt like
a little bit of the
so much
variations.
pink. I felt like it was like a pink sky.
Not
it was
all
like
the
hot
green
pink
and,
to me because I didn't have my phone out that was like selecting color and making it fancy. I saw it.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder like how often are you going to look at those pictures, and is it going to matter that you took the time to document it versus just experiencing it?
No, I mean,
because somebody else is going to take a better picture than you.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody else had a better view than our neighborhood that's like surrounded in trees and you can barely see the sky.
Yeah.
Like, anyway.
Yeah.
So I just felt like that was one example of like we're just creating content. We're not experiencing life. We're just like the other day when we were at Six Flags, all the kids were on Daisy's favorite little boat ride thing. That's like, ooh, Speedy's boat. I don't know. Speedy's boats. I don't know what it's called.
Yeah.
Is it Speedy Gonzalez? I feel like it's Speedy Gonzalez. Even though that doesn't make sense for him to be on a boat. But I think that's what it is. Anyway, the little boats. And like, I'm just watching every time the girls come around, they wave at me. Sue's excited. She waves. And so I'm constantly waving. And I look, every other parent has their phone out. Yeah. Their kids are waving and they're just holding their phone. Mm-hmm. And I was like,
you're not waving at your kid. Your kid's waving at you. Yeah.
And I thought, am I going to want a picture of them on this ride? No, they've ridden it like 100 times. I don't want a picture of them on this ride today. Like, Daisy looks crazy today. Like, this is, do I need this picture? No, I don't need this picture. I just want to experience the experience of them waving to me. Anyway, not that the pictures would have been bad, because not that they would have been bad if I took pictures, but it's just, it's so common that we just
you go to a concert and you're like watching the concert that you're there live
through a
screen.
So why don't you just stay home and watch it through a screen and save yourself a lot of money? Concerts are so expensive now; it's ridiculous.
It's like
$200 for a concert. It used to be like $20.
Yeah.
And I know inflation is a thing.
It depends on who you're going to see, but
I'm just saying. It was like $20 at the Tabernacle. I feel like the most I ever spent at the Tabernacle was $50.
Yeah. That reminds me, 68's coming back to town.
Are they? Imogen will be excited. Yeah. Imogen will want to know about this.
I know.
It's one of her favorite bands. So whatever your background, whatever identity you choose, there are songs, bumper stickers, YouTube channels, clothing styles that reflect the particular way you make sense of the world. Yeah. So there's always something to validate your life and give it meaning. That was page 48. So I was thinking about the symbols in our own life. And so I was thinking about, the large van, which is we didn't purchase a 12-passenger van because we wanted to make some kind of statement. Yeah. Because we needed seats for all of our children.
Yeah, we outgrew the minivan.
But we're at Meredith Feed and Seed, and they're putting the chicken feed in the car, and the guy's like looking at all their bumper stickers, and you can tell he's like trying to like figure out like what kind of people we are based on our bumper sticker, and so it's kind of
funny. We're projecting our identity, our curated
our weird identity, on the back of the van, and so there's like the church bumper sticker, and so he notices that, and he notices like the Duke Cannon bumper sticker, and then like he asked about like the obscure board games bumper sticker.
Potato
yeah. And so I was like, the kids are really into like board games and stuff, and so I was just thinking, like, it's such a weird conglomeration of things, probably because there's so many people in our family. Yeah. So we're a weird conglomeration of people.
We've got coffee brands, we got...
Right, and there's probably, like, a couple alma maters on there.
Tattoo artists.
Yeah, and Indian Springs, I think, is on there.
Yeah, they are.
But,
WBS.
Like, what kind of image are you going to get of us from our bumper stickers?
This is very weird people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was just funny that I had like a literal image of, here's who I am on the bumper sticker. So, and Imogene's currently trying to get stickers for Marty, her new car, that like convey who she is, and she's so tentative to get any because like you don't want to say the wrong thing, you don't want to present yourself as something you're not, and you don't want to, and so it's funny.
Yeah.
So he talks about, at best, local churches remind us that we're not our own, but belong to God. And in doing so, they disrupt contemporary understanding of meaning and identity. Yeah. And I feel like he'll probably get into this later. I don't know because I haven't read the whole book.
Yeah.
But briefly here, why is that so? How does the local church remind us that we belong to God?
Oh, well.
You're the one that wanted to not prepare.
Yeah.
You wanted unscripted.
So the local church doesn't always do that, because oftentimes,
it said at its best.
Yeah,
He said
oftentimes
at
the
its best,
local
how to
church
do it.
actually has liturgy. So every facet of life, and he quotes James K. Smith or references him. He's already done it already, or does it in these chapters.
I saw that name.
Yeah. So Smith has done a lot of work on like what he calls liturgies, and all of life is kind of catechizing us in different liturgies and whatnot. Whether you're going to a college sports game, college football game, or walking through the mall. I mean, the mall's a big thing. It's a huge image of how like our social imaginary, as Charles Taylor called it, our worldview, our sense of reality.
The mall as it is, or as it was?
No, as it was last time we were.
Because the mall as it is.
But so you've literally got these icons up everywhere showing you what the good life looks like. Okay, what you ought to aspire to and whatnot, and they're faceless. They're faceless, and they're okay. So
that's
and you've
weird that they always make mannequins faceless now.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be weirder if they had faces.
It would be weird. It always reminds me of Doctor Who. That first episode with the
Rose Tyler.
So some churches, so regardless of how liturgical or non-liturgical your church is, it is highly liturgical. It's got some way of kind of moving through. You got some way of moving through your time of gathering together.
The Not Your Mama's Church is still doing church in some form.
Yeah.
They have
and one day they'll say, not your mama's church.
Yeah.
So in all of our gatherings like that, there's some way in which our imagination of the good life and what we aspire to be and whatnot is being shaped. And sometimes the local church gathering is just a reflection of our own likes and tastes and interests. We talk about church shopping. What do we mean? We mean we're literally going from place to place to figure out what we like best.
That reminds me of that grace-based discipline where he talks about when you're, instilling rules on your kids, you're instilling, like, you're acting like things that are personal opinions or of biblical weight, hairstyle, clothing style, like these things, we try to make them biblical.
We sanctify those things in their preferences many times.
And so, he was just talking about in parenting, you need to differentiate between what is like the weighty things of God and what are just personal preferences. Yeah,
what are our preferences and what are like our values?
Yeah. And I don't believe in letting your kids do things you just hate.
Yeah.
Even if it is personal preference, just because you don't want to hate your kid, you don't want to hate the things that they do. But sometimes you do need to grow a little bit as an adult.
But so there ought to be something within the local church that when we gather together, particularly for worship, where we're marking time and we're marking space and acknowledging that we're not just a bunch of people who happen to agree who are getting together to encourage each other. We are encountering the living God who is triune, and not just kind of a nameless, faceless deity out there, because we're not deists, we're Christians. And so when we gather together, we're gathering to direct our hearts and minds and really order our lives toward this one as three that we worship. And at best, the local, what was the quote? At best, the local church gathering remind us that we are not our own. Yeah, but that like we are in need of grace from this God who we want to have a relationship, and with whom we want to have a relationship, and who has made us in his image and made us for that relationship and has redeemed us in his Son. And so in some
and then he sends us out as his hands and feet to the world. Like there's that there's that relating, and then that you're not your own. Like you're supposed to be going out. You're supposed to be caring for the orphans, the widows. Like there's more than just you here. Yes,
so you have the call to worship, or the invocation, and then you've got the benediction of sending out. We are gathered in order to be scattered. I often tell our people,
Yeah.
or we're brought together so that we can be sent out. We come to the table to feed so that we can take crumbs back out into the world and whatnot. Yeah.
I think that's a good description.
Mm.
How does the local church disrupt contemporary understandings of meaning and identity?
Well,
when we were in the bowling alley, it was kind of a weird thing to be because we're in the same place as a whole bunch of other people who are not there to worship God. But we're all in the same place. We all did the exact same thing that morning. We all got up, we ate breakfast, and we went to a bowling alley.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're in this kind of inner room.
But there's clearly a different identity for these in this room and these outside of the room.
Yeah.
Right? There's different meaning for life for those two groups.
Yeah.
Like it was just a very stark contrast of we all did the same thing this morning.
Yeah.
But for very different reasons.
Well, so when we gather for worship, we encounter the living God, and there is a kind of there ought to be kind of an Isaiah 6 type aspect to that encounter. We
what do you mean by that?
We gather in the presence of a holy God, and we recognize our undoneness.
Yeah. That,
man, like, and that's not to say, oh, we're all wretches and that we're all worms and
you're not going to depravity.
Your current, like, in your current state, your current interaction with God's grace, you are the most depraved, wicked person you could possibly ever be.
But what is man that you're mindful of him?
But yeah, like, and saved but the grace of God, there go I, like, I would be the one that you read about in the paper or see everybody, like, slamming on social media because of his sins made public or whatever, if it weren't for the grace of God keeping me and people that God has placed in my life keeping me and saying, by golly, you're not going that down that road. Yeah. And if you do, I'm going to chase you down and drag you back, So you
have an identity in who you are in Christ.
Yes.
And in the church.
That identity is affirmed, that identity is shaped and formed, that identity is kind of held. There's a reason why, and I'm not going to just try to slam on big churches, but there's a reason why people want to go to a big church where they've got all the programming. And they love the anonymity of a dark room with I'm standing next to a guy whose name I may not even know, and we can just, close our eyes and lift our hands if we want, or sit quietly. And if I miss 2 weeks in a row, or 3 weeks in a row, or 6 months in a row, nobody notices. Nobody reaches out.
But that's like also the thing that they complain about the most.
Well,
is
because
I was not there. I needed my community, and my community was not there. It's because you didn't make community.
Yeah. You
didn't make a real community. You can't show up next to someone and be like, "Oh, we're best friends."
Well, I think that's kind of
It's not how that works.
That's the tension with which I think Noble's dealing throughout the book is we want this and that. We want this and that. And, the world's made this way and yet it's this and that sort of thing. And so, no, I think that happens. We go to a small church and we lament how tough it is to be a small church. And dang it, we can't have our own building. And
it limits the amount of outreach you can do because you have limited resources. Yeah. And, you have to be nomadic and do weird things. Yep. Like meet in bowling alleys and
state parks
and the playground.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the positive ways that rituals and liturgies can give us meaning?
Well, number one, they do get us out of ourselves. There's something being scripted for you.
So that even when you don't feel like it.
Yeah. I had a professor in college, Rick Thompson, and one of the things he used to say was there are 2 times you ought to pray, when you feel like it and when you don't. And I think that's just a beautiful, it's almost Lewis-like, C.S. Lewis-like. Yeah. There are 2 types of people in the world. Which I know he's not the only one that said that, but he had a really good, uncanny way of putting that. But yeah, there is something good about being able to just offer up your own heartfelt cry in prayer. But oftentimes we don't, like we think, oh boy, I really ought to pray. If only there was something that could really help me. Well, pick up a daggone prayer book. Pick up the Book of Common Prayer and like read through some of those and try to get yourself down into that prayer life that's been being prayed by millions of believers for hundreds of years.
I think we misunderstand prayer in our modern times. We think of it more as like sitting on Santa's lap.
Yeah, it's this intimate moment between me and it's not just intimate. It's a private moment between me and God.
And I tell him what I want.
Yeah.
And that's what prayer is me telling God what I want.
Yeah.
And what he should do. And that's not really what prayer means.
Not if you read and take seriously the book of Revelation, Dennis Kinlaw had a really interesting line, and it's not unique to him, but it was prayer is entering into a conversation that's already taken place in the heart of eternity.
That's Paralandra.
It is, and
that's the end of Paralandra.
Yeah, and that's what gathered worship is intended to be, right? So Paul says that women should cover their heads, which we could quibble over, but then his reasoning is because of the angels. Like, wait, what? What angels? and we just kind of gloss over that and aren't startled by it. But the early church and church throughout history.
The women's covering their heads part, not the.
Wait, there are angels here and watching
right now.
Yes, and so the church throughout history, the Catholic Church has envisioned worship as being something that something wherein we are participating in eternity, where we're gathering together with all the hosts of heaven and whatnot, and we're joining our prayers with theirs in the bowls of incense being lifted up and whatnot. And so I forget what the question was, but
the positive ways that rituals.
Yeah, so ritual and liturgy, they are ways in which they're ways in which we mark time and mark space, and they're ways in which we are given words that we ought to have to give to God that we just don't have. Or even if we do have them, we often find it hard to verbalize them, or we find it hard just to set aside the time to pray them and to whatnot. And so sometimes it's nice to have sometimes even if you know how to cook and you're great at cooking and whatnot, sometimes it's really nice to have the recipe that is tried and true, that makes a banging banana pudding. And so stop trying to freestyle it and just okay. And sometimes those recipes shape your own ability. Like, I'm not saying only pray scripted prayers.
I learned to cook by taking a cookbook and cooking through the cookbook.
Yeah. You learn to, and that's how I learned to cook, is watching cooking shows and being like, I see what dude's doing with his wrist when he's. Oh,
that's why I have no knife skills though, because I learned to cook from a book.
That's why I have knife skills, is watching, and so so I think liturgy is not intended to be encumbersome, or I don't even know if that's the word. Or a
cumbersome?
Word. Yeah, it's not intended to be restraining. It's intended like a trellis to be something that you can grow your life up against, so that you can bear fruit, and so that you can pray better, and so that you can worship rightly and all that sort of stuff. I mean, and how far do you go saying, get rid? Okay, I've been thinking about that. How far do you go? How far do you go removing all of the quote trappings of liturgy? Do you say, okay, we're not going to read scripture? Because a lot of non-liturgical churches don't. Frankly, there's a verse, maybe a paragraph of verses that are read in the context of gathering. And so and then the sermon is preached. And so just think of the dynamics of that. We gather together for maybe an hour and a half, right? And literally, if you're preaching from 1 to 5 or 6 verses, that literally takes you maybe 10 seconds to read, maybe 30 seconds to read. And then you preach for at least 20 minutes, if not 40, 50 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And but we've gathered together for an hour to an hour and a half. And what are we doing? We're
Announcements take longer than
scripture reading. We're conjuring all of our own prayers. We're singing all the songs that we like, whether they're old songs or new songs. They're the ones that we like, that really make us feel something.
Or that fit with
with the theme, or fit with the people, or fit with the theme of what the preacher's going to preach on. Because again, he's going to preach for 30 to 40 to 50 minutes.
I do like it when the songs in the sermon go together.
I do too.
I do not like it when the songs are just out of left field and have nothing to do with each other. They gotta flow.
I do too. But so in stripping down the gathered service to just what feels sincere and authentic and heartfelt and what I'm really feeling. Well, who? The person leading or everybody? All the individuals that are gathering.
You and I even have different ideas of what ideal church would look like.
Yes, absolutely.
And mine, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be there.
This is why everyone should read the book Uncomfortable by Brett McCracken. But
so what are some of the, on the converse, what are some of the negative ways that rituals and liturgies impact meaning?
I mean, they just become dead ritualism. They become, just...
They lose the meaning.
They lose the meaning. But what I always say about...
Or like the Old Testament, like, I hate all this show. Like,
you're
doing the right things.
Yeah.
Your heart's just not in the right place. It's a heart posture.
But, and here's the... I was talking with someone, I forget who. I was talking with someone about that. I think it's Isaiah and Amos both make that accusation to Israel. But we read it anachronistically. We read it as existentialists. Like, what God's saying here, what Yahweh is saying here is, if your heart's not really into it, don't do it. Because sincerity and authenticity is the most important value. That is not what he's saying at all. What he's saying is, do not think you can pay me off to ignore your sin when you're mistreating the poor, when you're neglecting the orphans, when you're neglecting the widows, when you're not paying people that you've hired to do a service and you're just refusing to pay them. Like, do not, and then you think you can not just bring me sacrifices to pay me off and get me to look the other way, but you think that you can even offer me like unfit sacrifices, just like, well, whatever I offer up to God, as long as I really mean it. Yeah, it's almost the opposite. Like, whatever I really intend to bring him, he can deal with. And so he's not saying, oh, if your heart's not in it, don't pray your prayers.
Heart posture things.
They are, but they're heart postured differently than we would think of as post-enlightenment or post
because they are works related.
Yes, but he's not saying, if your heart's not really into it, don't read your Bible. He's not saying, if your heart's not into it, don't bother going to church. He's saying, don't think you can cover up your sin by going to church and dropping 20 in the plate or whatever. So
to bring in the book that we did for a small group, Learning to Breathe by Dr. Chris Lorstorfer.
Yeah.
So bringing that in, it's like, you've got the means of grace, but you've got the means of grace of piety and the means of grace of
works of mercy. Works of mercy, works of piety. Yes.
And so it's saying like, oh, well, you've got
refusing the works of mercy,
but saying that
because we've got to do the
piety when it's the opposite. You've got to do the works of mercy.
Yeah.
And you should do the works of piety.
And even then, sometimes that piety does become like a manipulative thing, even because you think of like
we're a meritocracy.
Well,
so I earn what I have, and I get what I deserve.
You get what you put in, and people get what they deserve. I still ain't seen mine. So we
kind of operate in that way in a spiritual sense.
Yes,
that's what you're saying.
Yes, but then also you've got like King Saul, right? So King Saul is waiting on Samuel the prophet. He's not showing up. They've got war coming. We got to offer the sacrifice because we're going into battle, and we got to make sure that God is happy and appeased, and he's on our side, so we got to offer the sacrifice, and Samuel's not coming, and we've waited 7 days. All right, I, the king, I'm offering the sacrifice. And boom, here comes Samuel.
It seems reasonable.
Well, sure.
It's in our... It seems so reasonable.
Well, of course, you got to offer the
7
sacrifice.
days.
Yeah.
They got things to do. They got people to kill.
But what Samuel's accusation is I desire obedience, that's not sacrifice. Like, I want you to obey me with all of your heart.
And so they should have just been waiting on God, no matter how long that takes.
Yeah. And he was obeying in the sense that, well, yeah, we've got to offer the sacrifice, but he was obeying in his own capacity.
He was obeying the way he wanted to.
The way he wanted to. Yeah. Yeah.
He was doing it the way he wanted to do it.
Yeah.
All right. So he moves into talking about society giving us values. I feel like most of us have seen a dramatic shift in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps every generation comes to that point where they feel like, you know, oh my gosh, the values have just shifted so much from when I was a kid. But I feel like globalization and the shrinking of the world kind of quickened the pace for that for all of us. Like, I feel like it's not even been like a lifetime. It's like, 5 years ago, values were different. Then 10 years ago were radically different than 15.
Yeah.
Things that were totally fine 15 years ago are now like taboo.
Yeah.
Like things that we were taught to value.
Yeah.
Are just, they're bad now. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, tolerance is almost bad now.
Yeah, tolerance is a bad word. You're going to tolerate bad things. Like,
that's what was so pushed was tolerance.
Yeah. But back in the 90s, that was the thing. Like, well, no, you can't tolerate.
Moved beyond
if you were conservative, tolerance was a terrible thing. Like, well, you can't just tolerate sin and whatnot. Yeah. And now it's, you're talking about tolerating?
You're going to tolerate it? Like, we're now to the point where you're supposed to affirm it.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
And so the things that we were taught to value have no value now. And so the things that our culture values now are not going to be valuable 10 years from now. Like, it's such a transient thing. So he talks about efficiency becoming the greatest good.
Yeah.
And it made me think about coffee. I wrote it in my notes.
I saw your note, making coffee.
I make all these notes, and then he has to come along and read behind me all my crazy notes.
Although I made it a point not to read your notes, so all this, I don't know what it said, but I did see making coffee.
I got some weird crazy
So
notes.
what were you thinking about making coffee?
So, efficiency, like in making coffee, you could consider every single way the best efficient way, depending on your perspective.
Yeah.
So, like, you have instant coffee, which is still a thing, much less used.
And it's normally made from, like, actual coffee beans.
Yeah, but it isn't easier than drip coffee, because you still have to heat water.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's efficient because it's able to travel. You don't have to have special equipment. Yeah. You just have to have the ability to heat some water, right? Mm-hmm. So it's efficient.
Yeah.
Standard drip coffee, you could say, well, that's efficient. That's what most people prefer is, like, standard coffee pot. You can get a machine that'll grind it and make it for you before your feet even hit the floor in the morning. Mm-hmm. Like, that is like peak efficiency, right?
Yep.
Okay, so then you have the French press pour over, which I know are not the same thing. But don't get mad at me.
Yeah, no.
But I consider them in the same category because they're both kind of bougie ways of making coffee.
Okay.
And you sacrifice some of that efficiency of speed and ease because of the efficiency of the better flavor and maximizing what you're getting out of your coffee.
Yeah.
And both of them, like, you're making the beans meet their full potential.
Yeah.
Because it's just better, according to, bougie coffee folks, which we do French press. And then you have, like, the Keurig coffee pod, little cancer packs. Sorry if you like them. But you're melting, it's plastic and you're melting it, and anyway.
Yeah.
My crunchy showing. Anyway, but it's individual coffee that's made whenever you want it. It's efficient, like efficient for you wanting 1 cup of coffee. It's not efficient when you want a gallon of coffee.
Yeah.
But it's efficient to, like, your personal preferences are different than your spouse's. Like, I love flavored coffee. You don't at all.
I mean,
and so like the small cup of coffee, like, everybody can get what they want. Kind of like, when you go to West Coast Diner.
Yes. Everybody can get what they
want. But it's like that kind of efficiencies. And then there are some things that are.
And I should note, I'm not beyond drinking a Keurig. I'm not. I don't have one.
I would be down just on the basis of heating up plastic and drinking it.
Yeah.
I can't stop thinking about it. Anyway, so every person though could argue that their way of making coffee in the morning is the efficient way.
Yeah.
Is the optimized way.
But even Keurig, you think about the cost per pod and
It's so
per cup. And
expensive.
yeah, gosh, it's crazy
It's so
expensive.
wasteful.
Yeah. And you can do like a nice French press and do a cheap coffee and enjoy it better than like a really nice coffee in a drip. But again, it all comes down to what are the things that you're valuing.
Yeah, you're prioritizing.
Is it the time? Is it the cost? Is it the experience? I happen to really like grinding the beans by hand.
Hey, we do not even use an electric grinder.
No,
it's that bad.
No, yeah, but
it's hand grinding. And
part of it is the type of grinder.
We have a big grinder and a little grinder,
Yeah.
and the little grinder is what he wants.
Jesse wants the big grinder though,
because
for his espressos.
the big grinder is wrong.
I hadn't told you that yet.
I don't know why it's wrong. So there are also things that are efficient but are not the best.
Yeah.
Right? Like a good meal is not efficient to make.
No,
it takes time.
forever.
It takes
money.
A meal replacement shake a lot more efficient. It's probably going to be cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to definitely be quicker.
Yeah.
It's just extremely more efficient. But and both you have the exact same caloric intake in both, but there's clearly a very big difference.
Yeah.
In the experience of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Also think about microwaves.
Yeah.
Like a microwave is incredibly efficient, but there's a huge difference in a pre-packaged thing of popcorn in a microwave and like popping it on the stove.
Sure.
Like,
and it costs a heck of a lot more for the microwave one.
Yeah. But there's an efficiency. But it's all in one. Like you don't even have to have a
you don't
pan
have
and
to
a
salt
bowl
or butter.
Everything's there.
And you don't have to clean it up.
And there's
afterwards.
like a big difference in reheating your
you get the butter all over your knuckles and whatnot.
There's a big difference in microwaving like your leftover Parmesan chicken and putting it in the oven. Like there's a difference in like texture and flavor. And so those are efficiency things that, yes, we get so convinced on efficiency that we stop thinking about like, this is gross.
Yeah.
Like microwave chicken is just gross. Like we don't want to eat that. Right?
Yeah.
So he also starts talking about identity politics, which I was going to ask you about.
I don't want to talk about it. Politics.
Okay.
What? No.
We didn't skip that. I was just wanting you to expound upon. He says identity politics right here.
Yeah.
Is inherently antagonistic. Like, what is the risk in identity politics? Identity politics being.
I mean, radical tribalism of like, I stick with my kind of people and. You know, this is what identifies us, and often.
But politicians play to identity politics.
Well, yeah, they do.
Like they
do.
Try to get the votes of certain subgroups because those people are all the same and they're all going to vote the same, right? So why does it matter if we are in the groups that they put us in?
Well, often because politics is reduced to like power sport. You know, it's all a game with. Couple of teams, and it's about who has power.
If I were a politician, the first thing I would change is I would stop voting in churches.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I hate voting in churches.
Open up all the public spaces.
Oh, you're giving to
holiday.
Caesar what is God's.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll skip identity politics a little bit. So society lets us belong. So living in a particular place for an extended period of time organically etches something of the natural environment upon you. That's page 57.
Yeah.
One thing I jokingly put in there is your Mississippi slipped out.
Yeah.
We joke about that sometimes. He'll say something and
wow, that was.
Most of the time, I feel like I don't sound Southern, but when I hear myself talking on video, like when this video goes live, I will sound like the biggest redneck in the world. It never fails that my voice in my head's not Southern and my voice in reality is. But a lot of times he'll say something and it'll be hilarious. Like he cannot say the word oyster. And so we'll always laugh that his Mississippi slipped out. And so another thing that I thought is sweet tea. Like that's like a Southern thing.
Yeah.
But it's also like so different state to state. Like Mississippi sweet tea is very different from Alabama sweet tea, is very different from Tennessee sweet tea, is very different from Georgia sweet tea, is very different from like, I don't know, are there any other southern states or are those all of them?
Louisiana,
yeah. So your sweet tea is different. Maybe South Carolina, maybe. Yeah. It's different wherever you go.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's like certain things that make your sweet tea. And one time, so when we were in Mexico, I was in Mexico with my grandmother, and you know, they talked about getting bottled water in Mexico, and I did not get sick.
Good.
So I don't, I mean, I'm not going to advocate for anyone to not drink bottled water in Mexico, but I did not drink bottled water in Mexico, and I did not get sick. So maybe I just have a gut of steel or something. But I remember ordering sweet tea at a restaurant in Mexico. I think
it was like fruit, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yes,
It was
yes.
mango juice poured into unsweet tea. It was so weird. I was like, well, I guess technically the tea is sweet.
Tea.
But
Interesting.
it was so different from region to region. And so those are just those things that when you live somewhere, it kind of changes a little bit about who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And those are like superficial changes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I feel like when you live in Georgia, you have to start appreciating peaches.
Mm.
You know.
Yeah.
Eat a lot of peanut butter.
Peanut butter, pecans, yeah.
You know. And so, like,
Medallion
those
onions.
things kind of change. And so, like, I grew up in Alabama,
Mm-hmm.
but the family was from the Nashville area.
Yeah.
And so some of the things growing up were Nashville,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where the family was from, and some of them were Alabama.
Yeah.
Like, I was not very into grape soda.
Mm.
It's an Alabama thing if you don't know.
Yeah.
Because we didn't drink
Grape
a lot.
Echo?
Grape Co.
Yeah.
I did not drink grape soda because I'm not from Alabama.
Yeah.
But I lived in Alabama. But I do love white barbecue sauce. It is
Yeah.
the superior barbecue sauce.
For chicken. Sure.
So he talks about consider how easy and normal it is when you move away from your hometown.
Yeah.
And like we're always surprised when we find people that are from here when we're here.
Yeah, yeah.
Like when you're here, you're like, hey, where are you from?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
We're
we're from upstate New York or Mississippi.
We're in the Atlanta suburbs.
Yeah.
And so when you find someone who's actually in the Atlanta suburbs, from the Atlanta suburbs, you're like, wait, what? You grew up here? And they're like, yeah. It's weird, right?
Yeah.
Like we expect everybody here to not be from here. And then for those of us who leave our hometowns, I don't know what it is for those that stay, but for some of us who leave, it seems weird that people stay.
Yeah.
Like when I was looking on Facebook not long ago, and I saw like some of my friends from high school who stayed, and they have like kids in the schools that we went to with like some of the same teachers. Yeah. It felt so weird. It's like that is so weird that you're like your English teacher in high school is your kid's English teacher in high school, but like that was normal.
Yeah.
For like basically the whole history of government education, which is not that long, but
yeah,
all of it, that would have been normal.
Mm-hmm.
Like your kids go to the school you went to.
Yeah.
But like it seems so weird to me.
Mm-hmm. It's
so weird. Does it seem weird to you?
It does. It does, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, we are uprooted as a culture. Huh. It's most people don't have like generational ties.
No. To
location.
And I think that's part of what kind of.
And most people don't live next. Well, I say most people. I don't know if it's most people, but a lot of people don't live near their family. You know, they're older generations of family and whatnot. Yeah, we live near no family. Yeah. Zero. And so it's always a little bit weird to me when people have family. They just. Yeah. Like, wait, y'all spend the holidays with you? Yeah. you can just call somebody and they'll come watch your kids for you. Yes. Like, that's a thing. And you don't have to pay them money. I think part of what tripped me up is thinking that when I was in school, like a lot of the people that were in school with me, like their parents might have gone to school there too. Like they all felt that belonging that I just never felt. Yeah. Because like we moved into town, we were outsiders, you know, into a small town. Mm-hmm. And so I never had that like deep sense of belonging there. Yeah. And so you talked about like, or I mentioned in there, I think I wrote in the margin somewhere about having no real roots. Yeah. And I've been lamenting that a lot lately. Yep, there it is. No real roots. Because, you know, we're launching the first kid of many. Yeah. Which is weird because we're not old enough for that. Mm. And she's not old enough for that, but it's happening. She asked me today if she could download a certain app on her phone, and I was like, you're a grown adult. I was like, you're an adult. Like, why are you asking me if you can download an app? And she was like, because you're my mom and you pay this bill and I live here. Yeah. But I was like, yeah, you're darn right. I was like, well, I guess you're right. But yeah, you can download it. It was like some stupid game that the little boys had been playing too. It was so stupid. But I've been lamenting a lot lately about feeling like we have no roots, because like we're launching one and you just feel like, I don't know, you feel like the launching base is just set on sand, like it's not rooted. Mm.
you know? Like, I feel like I can't even plant a literal tree and have literal roots. Like, my one tree that I've planted at this house.
He's struggling.
He is this tall, and he has been this tall for... Oh, no, he's not. He is tiny. His brother...
Tree.
He is so tiny.
Dead.
His brother's dead.
Didn't survive.
And he's been that way for years.
Yeah.
Like, no roots. Like,
Yeah.
even when I try to put down roots here, it does not work. So,
Ground's really hard.
yeah, he talks about not having to witness your neighbor's suffering and joy. That you don't have to feel responsible for their well-being. And so, I feel like that's something that absolutely changed. Because when I was a kid, the lady across the street was our family responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, we
used to go help her put up her groceries.
And I would help her clean her house. My dad would mow her lawn. I would help her with her garden, which meant I did her whole garden because she couldn't really do any of it. But like, she was our responsibility.
Yeah.
And we would
you
take
were
her,
your brother's keeper, which meant you took care of your neighbor.
And she wasn't our responsibility because anyone officially made her our responsibility. Like, no one said, hey, by the way, when you buy this house, you have to take care of this little old lady. It was just
a sense
we
of responsibility
chose to make her our responsibility.
Yeah.
So I was reminded of that this past weekend when we had the tree, half of it, the oak tree fell on our house. Everyone's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Best case scenario outcome from
Yeah.
a tree falling on both of your cars and your house. Like, it was like hardly any damage. But like the tree, it shook our whole house.
Oh gosh.
There's no way our neighbors did not hear that.
Yeah.
Not a single one of them came out.
They may have been. I know some were on vacation, and so maybe they all were on vacation.
They did not come out. Everybody went about their own business. Even the next morning, like when you can clearly see there's a tree laying on our house, covering our cars. Like, you can't even see Imogene's car. It was just gone. The tree guy didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
They were like,
So
wait. They're like, wait, there's a car under there? And we're like, yeah, that's a car. So like, but like, they can see it. And they're just like, oh, that's their business.
Yeah.
That's their problem to take care of. Like, some friends checked in on us and were like, hey, do you need a ride? Do you need like help? You know?
Yeah.
Because, you know, your cars are trapped. But like, our neighbors, they don't care. Like, that's their business. They can call an Uber if they need to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, literally no one even like glanced twice. And they'll probably complain that the tree guys haven't picked up the tree limbs from the front yard.
They're coming tomorrow. By the way, I talked to the tree guy.
Like, they'll complain about that because it's like they're having to drive past it every day and see it. And it's like obscuring their view of like a beautiful neighborhood, even though our house is not. Our house is like the preschool that threw up. But, you know, nobody cares.
Yeah.
We're not anybody's responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's our responsibility, but we're also not anybody's responsibility. Yeah. Okay. So, technology has effectively freed us from needing to belong where my body is. That I may sleep here, but I don't have to be here. That was page 59. Like, it's such an isolating way to live, but we see it in the church, too.
Yeah.
So, in 2020, I looked it up because I was very curious about numbers. I'm a very numbers person. In 2020, only 47% of Americans belong to a church, synagogue, or mosque.
Wow.
In 1937, the number was 73%.
Yeah.
Which is lower than I would expect, but still pretty high.
Yeah.
So most people aren't leaving one church and finding another. They're just leaving, period.
Yeah.
Just completely out.
Definitely.
Like, no, people
aren't. And that was 2020.
2020.
Yeah. It's worse since.
It is.
Far worse.
Only, like, they're out. Only 30% of self-professing Christians go to church weekly.
Yeah.
16% of people who say that they're Christian never go to church. Yeah. Like, not Easter, not Christmas. They just never go.
Yeah.
Because they can watch YouTube videos that cater to their spiritual preferences.
Yeah.
They can listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
They might. I don't know.
That'll be the interesting thing to discover down the road is
that they weren't doing any of the things.
Yeah, because you can read anybody who says, "Look, I can worship God without going to church on Sunday." There's somebody that does not worship God.
So so they can read the Bible translation of their choice.
Yep.
They can follow the spiritual leaders of their choice.
Yep.
They can experience a completely personalized version of religion that doesn't cost them anything.
Yeah.
They don't have to set aside time because they can just listen to a podcast on their regular morning commute.
Yep. They can even they could literally watch a whole almost sermon but summary of a book of the Bible that's animated. And I love Bible Project, but you can watch the whole thing animated in 5 to 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And
you're not having to spend any money.
Yeah.
That you're not choosing to spend. Like, you could support your content creators if you wanted to, but you don't have to. You don't have to be accountable. And you can accept and reject any doctrine that makes you feel the best.
Yeah.
Like, most people are not even like Reformed or Wesleyan anymore, or even like Roman Catholic or whatever, because they're picking and choosing what they want.
Well, that is one of the products of secularism, is we live as secular Christians. Like, oh, I'm a Christian, I'm a Wesleyan Christian, but I don't believe in the doctrine of hell. Or like,
yeah,
you can pick and choose what you want. You can curate your own like religious identity and formulate your own dogmas and doctrines, and
you don't have to adhere to those old creeds.
Yeah,
you can throw out the ones the wording you don't like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the technology use, it could be a help or a detriment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because we're currently using technology, hopefully as a help to our people.
Yeah.
So there have been studies on...
Even this book is a form of technology.
Yeah.
Not just produced by technology, but it is a technology.
Yeah, it is an advancement in...
You don't have a handwritten document that you had to pay hundreds of dollars to get your hands on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's been studies on social media use, and it found that older people in older generations, like generations older than me, that they are benefited from social media use. And that younger people are harmed typically by social media use. And those are gross generalizations. But it's because of how they use social media.
Yeah.
Because older people have a tendency to use social media to connect to people that they already know in real life. It's to enhance relationships they already have.
Yeah.
It doesn't replace it.
Yes.
Younger people replace their relationships with social media.
Yeah. Well,
so they no longer have friends in real life that are also happen to be on social media, and they sometimes text them or, Skype them or Snapchat them. A lot of their relationships are entirely based socially. And so that's a detriment. And so I feel like in the church, we're going to start seeing the same thing. That those who use technology, social media, that sort of thing, to like grow what's already there, are going to find benefit to it.
Yeah.
But those who are just using that are going to find zero benefit.
So Andy Crouch,
if not negative benefit.
Yeah, Andy Crouch in his book,
negative effects.
The Life We're Looking For, he talks about technology in those two senses, and I think he calls them tools or devices. And a tool is something that like you wield and it helps you accomplish something, right? And whereas a device is kind of wielding you.
Yeah.
I think that's the terminology he uses, tool and device. But yeah, it's the difference in, does this help foster a relationship I otherwise have, or is this the relationship?
Right. And so with the church,
and I'm passively in
am I using this as the entirety of my church experience? Like, this is how I belong to the body of Christ.
Yeah.
It's just this somehow digital version.
Yeah.
Which is not real. It's not a real
There's no
body.
such thing as an online church. No matter how you spin it, there just isn't. I mean, even, and you can say, well, yeah, but what about shut-ins? What about shut-ins?
Somebody needs to be going to their house.
Yes, typically and historically, they are connected to a body. They do have pastoral care, and it doesn't just come in the form of the pastor who's paid, but also it comes in the form of friends who have grown up with them and went to Sunday school with them and raised their kids with them and whatnot. And so shame on the local church that doesn't connect with and serve those shut-ins.
That lets them be disconnected.
And that exception does not like discount the rule. Right. Instead, it should cause the local church to say, how does this rule apply in this sort of scenario where this person is not able to get out? How do we still care for them, love on them, create opportunities for fellowship that may be creative, that may be out of, off the beaten path.
It's not the norm. It's the difficulty to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so then we go into chapter 3. All of this is only in chapter 2.
Yeah, and chapter 3 is longer than chapter 2.
Yes, but I feel like
we're gonna move. Yeah, we're gonna move through it though.
We're kind of toward the end of my notes, because most of my focus was in chapter 2. I feel like.
So 2 was how society helps you be your own, and 3 is how society fails us. I love that kind of.
Starting to go.
He turns from like positive to boom. It drops that hammer. It fails us.
So he talks a lot about pornography.
Oh, that was in 3. Yeah.
That was in 3. Yeah. And so I feel like C.S. Lewis discussed some of these themes in the abolition of man, especially like with birth control, like trying to control nature, you become controlled by nature.
Which is something we mentioned last week.
That something as simple as human biology is rejected because it's just inconvenient to how we want to live our lives. So in order to reject biology, we have to like work at it, and we have to take risks. Like birth control is extremely risky. Like extremely risky. And we're going to fight nature, and I don't think it's us that's always going to win.
No.
Like...
Well, and often, even in your winning, you find you
lost something that was not worth losing.
It wasn't what you bargained for. And when you don't want this winning to happen, but instead now you want this winning to happen, so you've fought having kids for 20 years, and now you want the kids.
30. 35 is average.
Well, yeah, but you didn't actively fight until you were 12 and you got the pill.
I gotcha.
So I was accounting for that.
You're accounting
and I was also accounting for young children being on birth control. Probably earlier than 12, many of them. But so you've that winning then was not getting pregnant. And winning now is, getting pregnant, having a kid.
Right.
And oftentimes what you find is you have sacrificed that future winning for the sake of present winning.
Because we take it for granted.
Yeah.
Because it's something that was so intrinsic to our society that you take for granted that you can just have a baby whenever you want to have a baby.
Well, because we live in a world that tells us you can have whatever you want, how you want, when you want.
And it's heartbreaking
and as customized
when
as you
can't.
Want. Yeah.
Like you just can't.
Absolutely.
Like it doesn't work that way. And we found that out firsthand because we had infertility for 2 years before we had our first.
Yeah.
And so like you just think, when you're getting married, like we'll have kids,
when
we want to have kids.
Yeah.
And that's just not how things work.
Yeah.
And then you have 9.
Yeah. And even then, like the temptation is always
to control
toward technique. It's always toward like, but is this reasonable, and isn't this like reckless, or
it's the most natural thing.
Yeah. Huh?
It's the most natural thing.
Sure.
You do what nature does. You do what nature do.
Nature do what nature do.
What you're created to do. I won't get off on that tangent necessarily. So I'm free to treat others as a means to my ends, as tools, as instruments for personal fulfillment, so long as they're compensated. He makes that point in terms of pornography, but as long as they chose that and they're being paid. We hate that notion.
Yeah.
When we're talking about rich men.
Like rich men?
Rich men, specifically.
Okay.
We hate the notion that if you have enough money to pay someone, you can just do whatever you want and have whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like, as a society, we reject that, but we embrace that.
Even the poorest among us live as if that is like the implicit, assumed rules of the game.
Right. When a celebrity or a politician use people, we think, oh my gosh, they're the worst
power,
person
so
ever.
I can just do what I want. Yeah.
But we do the same things. Like, how many waitresses or customer service reps are yelled at because we didn't get what we wanted?
Yeah.
And it's okay because that's their job.
Yeah. They're probably getting paid good money to take these calls. Yeah.
And it's okay because I'm mad.
Yeah.
So I get to treat this person the way I want to treat them because I'm doing business with their company and therefore giving their company money. The company is paying them, so they're being compensated. So I can use this person however I want to, even if that means I'm just screaming at them and treating them as less than human.
And not, so you think about...
I don't scream at customer service people personally because I find they do things for you if
Sure.
you're nice to them.
Yeah.
And because, you know, it is just their job.
Well, you think about it in the form, like in a local restaurant scenario. You know,
Yeah.
you're mad you didn't get what you wanted, or what you wanted came out too late, or whatever, and so you gripe, you argue, you fight, you demand to speak with the manager, you go like full on, and you end up getting a free meal out of it or a reduced meal out of it. What's the size of your tip? Because, free meal, so I have to pay nothing. Does that mean you're also tipping nothing? Because like,
Well, we're Americans, so we tip way too much. I
Well,
mean, in a restaurant,
because-
you have to tip because they really
because
don't pay them.
yeah. In the scheme of how tips and whatnot work globally.
But also,
Or
future,
internationally,
are you
I should
going to
say.
be able
Yeah.
to go in there again? Like,
Yeah.
you act a fool in a restaurant with me, I'm never going back to that restaurant. It is dead to me.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm going to just be too embarrassed.
Yeah,
so
but-
a free meal now means I can never eat here again.
But I don't know, because I've never like raised Cain to get a free meal and then walked away and not given a tip. Like I don't know that I've ever gotten the free meal, and I don't know that I've ever walked away not giving. I don't think I have.
Have you ever
But-
raised Cain in a restaurant?
What? I don't know. No, but I'm saying in a scenario where a person
I was
does.
just saying, I don't think I've ever done that in my life.
Yeah.
The most raising Cain I ever did was Blockbuster.
They make good chicken tenders.
Blockbuster makes
Raising
oh
Cane's.
at Blockbuster
Yeah.
because people don't know how to stand. We did not know how to stand
Well,
in
yeah.
line.
But we still paid to rent the movie.
But I was not.
Just
It
let
was.
me do
But
that on my own.
my. It was not the people working there. It was people.
It was
It
the
was other
customers.
customers that literally do not know how to stand
Butting
in
in
line.
line.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Lines.
So
Line
often,
etiquette.
like in a restaurant, you get a free meal. Okay, you just took money out of the company because they paid money for the food that you consumed or whatever.
Yeah.
But then also
And they paid the guy that cooked it. They
Yep.
paid the person that washed dishes.
Yep.
Like,
and you've just taken up an hour of this poor waitress's time where she could have been serving others better, working on other tips, yada yada. If you walk away from the table not giving her or him the tip as well, I don't know, that just
you didn't pay.
like you literally
You used them and didn't pay.
yes.
And people do that
And
all
they
the
didn't
time
sign
now.
up for that. You can
with
say,
Door-
well, they're a
They do
waitress,
it
so
all the
they
time
work
with
for
DoorDash
yeah.
and Instacart. They'll
Yeah.
lie and say that their food didn't get here, so
Yeah.
they can get free food, and they're thinking, well, it's just Instacart or DoorDash.
Yeah, I'm not hurting anybody.
You're
Yeah.
hurting that driver. Like, they
Yeah.
can lose their job for that stuff. Anyway.
Yeah.
So he also talks about the endless coping mechanisms. And he talked about it earlier in the book as self-medicating.
Kind of a spiraling.
And then in chapter
yeah.
4, he's going to go back into the self-medicating I saw. So our coping mechanisms start requiring coping mechanisms
to deal with coping.
to deal with the coping
Yeah.
mechanisms. It's like, you know, when you take a medication that has a side effect, and then you have a medication for the side effect. And so now you're on 2 medications, and then the medication for the side effect has another side effect, and so you have a medication for that side effect. And so before long, you're on like 10 medications when you only had one problem to begin with. And the one problem you had to begin with might not have even been worth all this junk.
Yeah. And might could have been solved if you just lost some weight. Or,
Yeah.
like,
Like something stupid.
lose 20 pounds.
Or like, hey, do you
and
need
that flutter will stop
you need
or
to take
whatever.
some vitamin D? Like, go
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we all have this unfulfilled promise of a good life, is what he calls it.
Yeah.
That basically, if you adjust to living in this habitat, you're going to be happy. That if I can just adjust, if I can break my soul enough,
Yeah.
I can just be happy here.
Well,
But what do you give up trying to break yourself enough to fit?
well, there are the three things you have to do. Number 1, accept that you are your own and belong completely to yourself. Number 2, work every day to discover and express yourself. Number 3, use all the techniques and methods perfected by society to improve your life and conquer your obstacles. Again, it's all 100% on you.
Yeah.
The weight of being.
The image is just, it's always shifting. Like, you've got the donkey with the carrot,
Yeah.
but the carrot's attached to the donkey, and so it doesn't matter how long the donkey walks, how fast he goes, he's never reaching the dang carrot.
Yeah. It's always
It's
going
always
to
going to be the
in front of
same
him.
distance
Yeah.
in front of his face. Like, I feel like that's what we're encountering.
Maybe if he like kind of juked it and then it swung toward him. It can get. Sometimes you just gotta juke life.
So you think about it, like when you make a goal, once you hit your goal, what do? Make a new goal.
Pick a new goal. Yeah.
Okay. So like if I run,
because those goals need to be like short and measurable.
Right. If I run a
yeah.
5K, which I'm not gonna do.
Yeah.
I'm not running a 5K. But if I did, what's my next goal?
Yeah.
The 10K.
Sure.
All right. If I run the 10K, my next goal is then the half marathon.
Yeah.
Even if I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna run a half marathon because that's just crazy. I'm gonna keep running the 10K. Every time I'm gonna be trying to beat my
personal
time.
best. Yeah.
Like, I'm never gonna be happy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never just gonna achieve something and be happy with my achievements. Like, it's always gonna be more.
Yeah.
Like, they always say, like, the joy is in the journey. And that would be a good thing because we never get into any destinations.
Yeah.
All we have is the journey.
So
if the joy isn't in the journey, we're all in trouble because we're just all wandering in the wilderness with no promised land.
Joyless.
Yeah. So he talks about society not offering clear goals.
Yeah.
So there's the trap of new technology. Like, let's say I buy a new iPad, right? And I didn't have an iPad before. The iPad becomes part of my daily habits. It becomes part of my life. If the iPad breaks, I have to replace the iPad.
Yeah.
Before I was fine with an iPad. Yeah. But now I have to have an iPad.
Yeah, yeah.
Because now it's necessary.
Yeah.
Right? Remember when we all switched to smartphones? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was like a big thing. And like not everybody switched all at the same time. Like we kind of all staggered out switching to smartphones. But like now.
Because you liked your Nokia.
Could you go back to your dumb phone?
I wish I could.
Technically you could. But do we?
Yeah.
No? Because now we see the smartphone as a necessity of life. We have to have it.
Yeah.
Like as technology increases, what we need increases. Like, and it doesn't stop. Like when we were kids, you didn't even have to have a computer at home.
No. Like
that was not expected. Now a kid has to take their own computer and a backup computer or device to take the SAT. Like they don't just have to have one computer. They're supposed to have access to two. And you got 2 kids taking the SAT. That's 4 devices.
Yeah.
We
did that 2 weeks ago.
That was crazy.
A week and a half.
That's crazy to expect.
Yeah.
So we get to the cover of the book. Which is, and your shirt, I guess.
Yeah.
Sisyphus.
Yeah.
So I thought for the longest time that this was balloons on a wire. I thought it was balloons, and then he was like, "Oh, that's Sisyphus." Anyway, yeah. I was seeing balloons.
A bunch of them, 3 of them on the cover.
Yeah, that's So his eternal punishment was to push a rock up a hill, only to have it fall back down from the top every time it reaches the top.
Yeah.
It's the always striving, working, never succeeding. That's the language of the curse of the fall.
Yeah.
Like just the constant toil and hardship, the work without any rewards.
Well, yeah, and it's not the work that's bad.
No, it's the work without reward.
The troublesomeness of the work and the work without the rewards and the.
Well, that's what I point out. The opposite of that is
the
heaven.
planting with no fruit.
Is you work with rewards.
Yeah.
You build a house and you live in it. You plant a vineyard, you reap your harvest. And modern life is just the opposite.
Like the new heavens.
New heaven, new earth. Modern life is the opposite. We don't build houses.
Yeah.
Like people don't build their own house anymore. That's not like a thing people do. Like even if you build your own house, somebody else builds your house.
Yeah.
You don't build
somebody
your
else
house.
Designed it. Somebody else built it.
Right.
Yeah.
A third of Americans don't even own houses.
Yeah.
Like we don't own a house, but like we're in a large
we're
a
in
large
good company.
minority.
There are a lot. Yeah.
They just don't buy houses. We don't build up legacies. We don't like have the family farm anymore. We don't have like the family business for future generations because those are things just for the here and now, and I'll liquidate it when I want to.
Yeah, and often like the estate that's being left for the kids or
the kids don't even want it.
It's going to get liquidated. It's just going to like sell it
because the kids are going to sell it
it
because they've got their own thing that they're doing that makes meaning for them in their own place. We talked about planting blackberry bushes forever.
Yeah.
And we just never do. And the reason we never do is because we can't take them with us if we have to move.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like these temporary things that you never actually like plant a vineyard and eat your fruit because you can't plant the vineyard because either because of zoning laws or because You just don't have any roots.
You don't want to invest in something that's may not be yours down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you start talking about competition being the heart of success. That everybody's competing with everybody else. And
you're competing even with your own self.
Yes.
Competing with yourself from yesterday or last year or the last drive in the car. He talks about that with his wife's new hybrid.
That seems like a guy thing.
It is, but girls compete just as much.
Well, yes, but I can't. I'm talking about the car specifically.
Sure.
I would not be competing with myself for fuel efficiency. Yeah. So, but that's why I said you can't have a personal opinion about anything, because whatever you say says something against somebody else.
Yeah.
I found this in motherhood.
Oh.
Specifically, like as a mom, you can't say you do. Like I cannot
diapering, breastfeeding, like all that.
Well, like, I can't say
critiquing.
I don't let my kids
diaper?
eat cereal. And I'm talking about like the American box version of cereal, not like oatmeal, rye, barley. I'm talking about like a box of breakfast cereal, enriched breakfast cereal. I don't let my kids eat cereal, and like there are valid reasons. Some are health related and some are just practical reasons.
The most pressing was they make a complete mess around our house.
And it's such a waste.
Cereal. Yeah.
They waste so much of it.
Everywhere.
I don't want to be feeding bugs. Anyway. Yeah. So, but if I tell another mom, I don't let my kids eat cereal, they're going to hear me say.
They feel like making
They're going to hear me say, you shouldn't let your kid eat cereal.
Yeah.
They don't hear me say, I don't let my kids eat cereal. They hear me say, you shouldn't let your kids eat cereal.
Yeah.
Because it's a competition. Because I didn't apply that, but that internal competitiveness says that I'm trying to gain points and be like a crunchier mom than you because I don't let my kids eat cereal.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're the crunchier mom if you do because cereal's crunchy. Anyway.
It's like organic granola or something.
And like, we know that's ridiculous. Because I know when I make my decisions, I don't think about what everybody...
How is this going to be a judgment on everyone else that I know?
And I don't think about it in terms of like, oh, it's going to make me look better than everybody else. Yeah. Like there's a YouTuber and TikToker really very crunchy and she like makes jokes about that. Like about trying to be better than other moms. And like, it's always ridiculous. But that's how we act. We act as if other people are really doing this.
Yeah.
So all of my parenting decisions have to be about you, and all your parenting decisions have to be about me.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. Anyway, so if my success is my doing, their failure must be their fault. And I feel like we fall into this trap a lot in the church.
Okay.
That if it's in a different flavor, it's if God is blessing this, if I have this success that I deem the quantifiable success,
results,
as I basically as I say that they should be, because it's always about my own metric. Then God's blessing it. Like we say, oh, I'm not into prosperity gospel, but if I
look at how God's blessing this thing over there.
Exactly. I don't believe in the prosperity gospel, but like we were just struggling really hard, and so therefore God wasn't blessing it.
Yeah.
God wasn't in it. Even though you know that God called you to do that thing.
Yeah, it was really hard to do. So God was probably giving us a sign to get out.
Yeah. But we see that evil people get what they want.
Sure.
Does that mean God's blessing what they're doing?
Yeah. Half of the Proverbs and the Psalms are like, Lord, why is it that these
You've
people
got evil politicians that like have all the money in the world.
Yeah.
And so is God blessing them what they're doing?
Yeah.
But somehow our little ministry that we've got going on has to be like perfectly exactly blessed as we want it to be, or God's not. We're going to say God's not in it.
Yeah.
Even though we know He's calling us to it, and He continues calling us into it.
And He often calls us into things that are really hard and don't have like immediate results.
And don't have quantifiable
like
results.
Marriage and family. You know.
Yeah.
It's always hard. And the
I'm sorry.
No, well, but you don't have like the immediate results, because even now, like, okay, we've got Imogene, going off to college, but that's been 18 years in the making.
I mean, you don't know how well you did until you're done.
Yes, the vast majority of that, you're thinking, could she even pass like whatever tests that she would be taking in college?
Oh my gosh, yeah, with homeschooling especially, because you're like, you're having to, like, they're having to go take a standardized
Mm-hmm.
test for 3rd grade, and you've, like, actively ignored all the standards.
Yeah.
You just did your own thing the way you thought it should be done because you thought standards schmandards. Like,
Yeah.
and you're like, maybe that's a mistake. Hopefully not.
Yeah.
And so you get to the end and you're like, hopefully not a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, not a mistake, by the way.
Not a mistake.
You can,
No.
it is standard schmandards.
No, yeah. But, so, like, yeah, marriage and family. There are a lot of people who do quit when it's hard. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
But
it's just,
but
sometimes,
it's yeah.
is the harvest worth it, even if the harvest is small?
Yes, and even when you
when
can't even quote see the harvest, like, why does this faithfulness matter?
Yeah.
And why
I'm still
does
so
this
far from that
like
harvest.
slow, steady, like discipleship in the same direction and whatnot, and you know, the daily formations of family devotions and all that sort of stuff, like, you never see the like, there are times where you get glimpses of the results. There are times when you've got those like kind of ecstatic realizations where, like, you see that it's working, you see that it's hitting, but that's not like every day, like, oh man, it's so glorious, and you know.
Yeah. You kind of have the toil.
Yeah.
But as Christians, like, we fall into that trap of, you know, my success is my own making and their failure is their own fault.
Yeah.
And so we see that in the church too. Like, a church is successful because
they do things the right things the right way. Yeah. And every Sunday,
and
the crowd's got to be bigger than the last. The music's got to be more jamming than the last.
Any church should not rise and fall on the pastor.
Well, no.
I mean, I do think the pastor has a very large, pivotal role in the church.
Yeah.
But any church or even organization, like Christian organization, mission city organization, like, it should not rise and fall on just the main leader. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially like a church. Like, if God calls you elsewhere, or like you drop dead tomorrow, you should hopefully be replaceable.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But God's going to do the work that God's going to do.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like we kind of, like, as ministers, as people in ministry, full-time ministry, we feel like all the pressure's on us. And that if we're doing it right, it grows a certain way, and if we're doing it wrong, it doesn't.
Yeah. If it ain't growing, what are we doing wrong?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we, like, people, like, not we, because we tend to stay away from, like, those types of things, but you go into, like, the business mindset of, how do I optimize? How do I make peak efficiency? How do I...
Well, and that's a huge part of what he was talking about in the last chapter 3.
Right.
2.
Efficiency.
Efficiency, technique.
Yeah. How do we change what we're doing to make it more efficient? And it's like, how do I change what I'm doing to reach more people? Maybe.
Yeah.
How do I change what I'm doing to better disciple people? Perhaps. But peak efficiency, like, how am I quantifying that?
Yeah.
Anyway, so few modern people allow themselves to consciously admit that they use the social media platform for competition and comparison, but we know it. So I was thinking, like, how many times do you fall for the filter, for the trick of light, for the, like, perfectly framed picture?
Yeah.
Like, you see a party and it looks like there are hundreds of people there because of where they are in the crowd and how they're holding the camera.
Oh,
and you realize, like, there have been some times when I've been at something and, like, the pictures made it look like the thing was hopping. And I know for a fact there were, like, 20 people there.
Oh, well, churches do it all the time.
Like,
churches do it all the time. Their website, the front page will look like, man, how many hundreds of people go?
Especially with stock photos.
Stock photos, or even, like,
churches,
their own curated.
Don't use stock photos for your website.
Yeah,
Stop it. It's
show
not
what you
real.
really look like. You'll have, like, the silhouette of somebody's hands up, and it's all dark and lights and everything, and then you go in person and you're like, oh wow, there really are like 30 people here.
Yeah.
And we're not knocking 30 people. That's our church.
Yeah.
But we're not using that photo
No,
with all the silhouette and whatnot.
No. But you know what it's like to see, like, so you see the person on
Yeah.
on social media, right? And they've
Yeah.
got that filter and that angle, and you're like, wow, they have lost so much weight and they're glowing. Oh my gosh, they look great. And then you see them in person and you do not recognize them. I have literally walked
They're
past,
bigger than they were last time I saw them.
I have literally walked past people in the grocery store that I know, but I haven't seen them in person in so long that I only see them on social media that I didn't realize it was them.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what? I know you.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
You have like that moment of like, oh my gosh, I know who you are. Like,
yes.
you
And
look
you don't
nothing.
look
You
like-
do not look like anything like the picture
You don't look
posted
like
2
the
days
photo.
ago, right? But
yeah.
so we cognitively know that people do this,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that they do it with their house. Like, we know nobody's house is spotless all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we know that they do it with their jobs.
Yeah.
That people act like they're happy when they're not. We know people do this in ministry, that they show the make it look like a big crowd and it's just not.
Yeah.
But we compare what we know of ourselves with those like select filtered images. And so it's not comparing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because you're comparing your like deepest, darkest, dirtiest bits with everybody else's brightest, shiniest, fakest bits.
Yeah, yeah. No, and
these aren't the same thing.
You compare your like mess of a house to this person's like perfectly framed picture of them standing in the corner. Yeah. Where, yeah, sure, everything's spotless there. Like, what the heck, this wall, it's relatively clean. There's writing on almost all the other walls.
That wall
in chalk.
has ceiling misspelled on it.
Yes.
Someone misspelled the word ceiling on that wall.
Yeah, about like ceiling, upstairs ceiling, not like sealing a window or sealing a crack.
Either way, they misspelled it.
Yes.
Anyway, so we compare non-comparable things.
Yeah.
Like, we don't compare our highlight reel to their highlight reel.
Yeah.
We're comparing like our worst parts to their best parts.
Yeah.
And those aren't fair comparisons. It's like comparing when you're trying to decide what to do and you're comparing like the risk of one thing with the rewards of another thing. Well, that's not a fair comparison. You compare risk to risk, reward to reward.
Yeah, they're
like,
yeah.
And
Tom Shalhoub talks about this in like he did it was for Prager University, I think. He talked about like just the detrimental effects of comparison.
Yeah.
And how like you can't there is no trading off of like, oh boy, if I just had this guy's that and that guy's that. It's you get the whole package or you get none of the package.
Right.
You know, there is no like, oh, if I had his marriage and his like success in business and her relationship with her kids and like, no, it's they are a person and that is a total package. And that is a whole thing. You are a person and that is a total package. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's not new information to anybody.
No.
Everybody knows this.
Yeah.
But we'll still look at like a YouTuber, an influencer, and be like, they're living our best life.
Yeah, they're living the dream. If only I could vacation as often as
and we
they
try
do.
not to covet. Like you try really hard not to break a commandment.
Mm-hmm.
But like you still compare.
Yeah.
And you still feel like you're coming up short.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we live in this
so that's the funny thing, thinking back about the mall.
Yeah.
Advertising is all about that. It is all about making you realize what your lack is and how incomplete your life is. And if only you had this, man, you'd really be it. But the way social media works is everyone in our lives is an advertiser. They really are now because like everyone has affiliate links. Everyone has Amazon. We've got affiliate links.
Yeah, I have affiliate links. Everyone has Amazon storefronts. Everybody has that's one of the reasons that I got out of reviewing because it felt like I was just constantly selling things.
Selling things that you didn't care that you had. Or
I was reviewing things and like what initially started, I was reviewing and like telling people with just my thoughts and feelings to help them better spend their money. Became like this feeling of I'm having to sell. Yeah. Like I am the advertiser now. Yeah. And I didn't like that. Yep. So we live in this hyper competitive society. I feel like parenting highlights this very much. It's about like whose kid can walk fastest, whose kid can read fastest.
What percentile?
Yeah, what percentile are they in? What's their AR reading score? And like as homeschoolers, when you opt out of a lot of those like metrics, it drives people crazy because they don't.
What grade are you in?
Because they don't know where to put you in comparison. They don't know how to compare you to them. And so like when you've got kids who like Pippin will tell you he's in college and he's
because he's doing some college math.
He's
sometimes.
11, but like because grades don't matter when you're not in large groups. When your whole education is fitted to your person, your grade doesn't matter, and so you don't get grades. Like, and they're like, oh, well, what grade did they get in math? Like ABC. They do the math until they get the math right.
They get hundreds on everything. What are you talking
have
about?
to get 100 because you're not doing the next thing until you finish this thing, and finishing this thing means getting it all right.
Yes.
And so like, but when you opt out, when they're like, oh, what's their reading level? But I don't know. Who's going to sit around and giving a homeschool kid an AR reading score? They just read what they read.
Yes.
You know? But people don't know how to compare you. They don't know how to be competitive with you. And because, you know, they assume that their kids' successes are their own.
Yeah.
But they don't take on their kids' failures.
No.
They don't say, oh, my kid's drinking problem is my fault. You know? I've never heard a parent be like, oh, yeah, that addiction that kid has, totally that's on me. I totally did things wrong. That was mine.
Nobody owns
that. You try to take their successes from them and not their failures.
Yeah.
Their failures are on them or their dad, whichever. So there were 2 ways of dealing with the world. There was affirmation and resignation.
Affirmation, you participate in the game.
Yep.
You try
if
to
at
do
first
your
I
best.
don't succeed, I get a self-help book and I try again.
Yeah. And resignation is, I'm not going to win the game most likely anyhow, so my participation in it is to refrain from participating in it. I'm just resigned to not participating in the game, and we often think of that as like defeat or defeat or depression, you know, like sitting around video gaming instead of going to class. Oftentimes that's intentionally done. It's not just a default position. It's I'm not going to do well in the class regardless, and what I can control is what I'm doing with that time otherwise. And so I just don't do that. I don't participate in that game. I do something else, another game that I think I can be successful at.
We have this argument with carpet cleaning all the time.
We do.
Because I don't want to clean the carpets because it doesn't make a difference. They look terrible.
It
They're always
It could be a little bit better. It could be a little bit better.
He always thinks that the next carpet cleaning
Watch
is
the
going to be a
darn
miracle.
carpets. Come on.
You know? The next guy is going to get it perfect. And it's going to magically be perfectly new carpet again. It's never going to be new carpet again. So a lot of it's that locus of control issue. Like we either have an internal locus of control or an external locus of control.
What does that mean?
Internal locus of control means that I believe that I control my own life. Right?
Yeah. I'm my own captain.
I control myself. You control yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So I can pull myself up by my own bootstraps. If anything happens or doesn't happen, I'm the only one to blame. But you're also in control of your life, so you need to handle your own stuff. External locus of control is I'm passive. Life just happens to me. I have no control over the outcome of my life. Things just happen. I'm never the one to blame.
Both of those are very like defeating sounding.
Yeah. Well, both can be true.
Sure,
like,
both can be true, but if
there
both
is a place,
are wholly true,
there's a place for personal responsibility. But there are also ways that the world isn't as it should be. The fall happened. The world is not as it should be. But I do have to take responsibility for my part in this world. Right? I can acknowledge that the fallen world isn't as it should be, but I should also be responsible for trying to make it what it should be. So it's both. And so I feel like, and he does talk about the affirmation resignation being kind of a polarity where you fall somewhere in there. And he's like,
and sometimes you are
he
affirming.
Says you're basically only affirming until you're resigned. Like, you basically say, I can win this until you can't.
And sometimes you're like kind of a default resignation type person until you find the thing that makes you tick, and you can become you can go the way of affirmation.
And a lot of this has to do with that existential anxiety that we talked about last week. That I can control and make meaning for myself, but in the end, I'm nothing and it's not even going to matter.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I can matter to me while I'm doing something, but it's not going to matter to anybody else.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So he says the secret to a good life, they're told, is discovering what they love and doing it for the rest of your life. And our society has provided so many career choices that all my students have to do is discover that one perfect career and be good enough to get hired. So, of course, the problems in this are how many necessary jobs are passion jobs? You know, like there are so many necessary jobs in this world that are not passions. Like,
boy, what I really, really love is unclogging toilets.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like
that makes me get up in the morning.
I feel like most plumbers probably get into it because they enjoy like putting things together and making things work, and they enjoy the idea of I can make a lot of money doing this.
Yeah, I can make a lot of money doing things that others can't or don't want to do.
Right. I feel like most plumbers are not in love with the idea of fecal matter.
You
know, most colorectal surgeons probably would say the same.
Yeah.
You know, and so there are a lot of necessary jobs that are done that are maybe not passion jobs.
Yeah.
Things that you just really want to be doing. I've done a lot of jobs that were not passion jobs for me.
Like bathing dead people.
Yes, like bathing dead people. That was one of my jobs.
Like tackling schizophrenic men.
Yeah, actually, that was a passion job. Actually,
tackling elderly schizophrenic.
Actually, really enjoyed working with schizophrenic people in a mental hospital. I did not enjoy working for the state. That was not a passion. So, but like the question is, how am I supposed to find that one perfect career?
Yeah.
Like we've got two kids.
You take a test, and then it's efficient. It picks for you.
We've got 2 kids who are currently in that process right now.
Yeah.
I guess 3 really, because Emery is going to 10th grade.
But he knows what he's going to do.
But he's got his settled. Emery is our settled one. He knows exactly where he's going, what he's doing in life. But we've got 2 of them. One of them knows kind of the right direction she's heading.
Yeah.
And she thinks she's on the path that's going to get her to her goal.
Yep.
Because there's just no real strong path to where she wants to go.
Yeah.
And then we've got another one that has no clue.
Not a clue.
And that's a lot of pressure, like finding that one perfect choice. And like we can say, oh, we'll pick it for you because we know you.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to do what we
He doesn't want to do what the perfect thing would be.
He doesn't want to do the thing that we think that he's made to do.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is he thinks he's not going to be good enough to do that.
Perhaps. Yeah.
But also
a lot of that is resignation, way of resignation.
But also it could just be, what if you love doing something that you're just terrible at?
Yeah.
Like what if the thing that just is your passion is not something you're actually really good. The thing that you're really good at is something you just don't want to do?
Yeah.
Like I'm really good at a lot of things that I don't like doing.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah.
Like there are foods that I'm like the best at making. I'm the best scrambled egg maker in the house. I hate scrambled eggs.
Yeah.
So, but what if the things that I love I'm just bad at? And then the question is, if I mess up, what's the cost of just starting over? And it feels like sometimes the cost is just too high that you're not going to be able to start over.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, especially if you sink tens of thousands of dollars into it. And
I feel like you had it easy.
Yeah.
Because you were called.
Yeah.
Like there's just no.
Yeah.
Once God calls you to do something, like there's nothing else you can do.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there are other things you could have done instead, but yeah, if you're resigned to following that calling,
if you say I'm called, then there's one thing for you.
Yeah.
And that one thing, full-time ministry, it might take a bunch of different forms, and you may like struggle with like where you're going, where he's leading you specifically to do these things.
Yeah.
You at least know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like for most people, it's finding what to do and where to do it and how to do it, and like it's a lot.
Yeah.
So he also notes that his Noble is a English professor.
Yeah. Oklahoma Baptist University.
I feel like that should just be noted. But he notes his disappointment at the ending of the bell jar.
Yeah.
He said that the solution didn't solve the problem. But the thing is, so I'm going to bring my psychology back around. Often the solutions to our problems, the solutions are unrelated to the problem. Because most of our problems are just unsolvable.
Yeah.
In the bell jar, right?
Yeah.
Esther's problem, there was no way for her to solve it.
Mm.
There was no solution. All the solutions were just pick something and move on.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there isn't a good there's no functional way. So the solving the problem is just learning to live with whatever you choose. The
It
problem
reminds me
doesn't
of the
actually
quote
get
from
solved.
Thomas Sowell: "There are no solutions. There are always only trade-offs."
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Most of our problems in life, there's not like a direct solution. There's not really a perfect good way out of it. There are just the ways that we're choosing to deal with it.
Yeah.
Which is what she ends up doing, right?
Mm.
And after the book ends, like, she probably just compartmentalizes it and hopes that she never thinks of that stupid fig tree ever again. Because that's what most of us would do. We would just make a choice, roll with it, and try to never think about that what if again. We don't want to be Uncle Rico throwing that football all over the mountain.
Coach, you put me in.
Yeah, right.
State.
We don't want to be that.
Yeah.
So we just try to find a solution and move on, but the solution doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the problem.
Mm.
And that's human psychology. Like, that is just where were there better solutions for Esther? Like, probably, you know.
But even then, they weren't solutions so much.
They weren't solutions.
Yeah,
it's just,
they were
always
choices that were gonna have trade-offs, and
and it disappoints us because we don't want that to be the case, but that is the case.
Yeah.
We want life to be better than that, and it just isn't.
We have visions and dreams of idealized.
We want definite story arcs, and life doesn't work in definite
it
story
worked
arcs.
out as it ought to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just not the way it works. So we end the chapter with Noble pointing out the result of all the failing society, which is self-medicating, which is where we'll start again next week.
Yeah, because society fails us.
Yeah.
Because society is built around the idea that we are our own.
And we are the problem, and there's no solution to us.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a solution to us. It's Jesus.
Yes.
But, you know.
Okay. Well, that was fun.
Tons
of fun. Join us next week. Chapters 4 and 5.
Yup.
Yeah.